that are hooked into this.
Yep.
Because I've got my iPad, my whatever laptop, and a printer. So it's a great device. Yeah. Yeah, I feel actually quite good about all the stuff that I have around for any emergency. Do we have quorum?
You do.
Okay. So I guess we could get going then. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to put my gallery on so I can see who's here. Yeah. Good. Look at that motley crew. Looks like Scott Moffat has a different setup. Is it? It looks different. Anyway.
I switched the side of the table I sit on in my camper. That's all I've done.
Okay, I'm still on the same side, so. All right. This is a public
Any
meeting.
update on when you get to move back in the house, Scott?
When I have less kids.
Don't tell. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. Listed as items 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And it teaches us to take those couple of weeks off, folks? On today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on September 9th, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. So, as you know, if you have any motions that you haven't haven't sent to the committee coordinator yet, so that we can all see them, including the people who are here as delegations or the people who are the applicants, that would be great if you could send those forward. We have a very special time that we're going to take this morning to honor somebody who has worked in the former city of Nepean and certainly at the city of Ottawa, and has certainly, every one of us have benefited greatly from his outstanding work over all these years. My entire career of 23 years now, Frank Bedin has been one of my go-to people. And we all know how important it is to have those go-to people. Just the person you can call, no matter whether it's 11 o'clock at night and Frank happens to be in an arena with family, or it's a Sunday morning and there's just something that you just, you're not being inconsiderate, but sometimes things happen that people really need our help and they need it fast. And he's one of those people that has always been there. Not always been there just being there, but always been creative and always in finding a solution, and also in having it, even if it's on the phone, you can tell that he's got a can-do attitude, a smile on his face, in person or on the phone. That's just the kind of guy he is, and we're going to miss him terribly. Over the last several years, I know that Chair El Shantiri talked at the council meeting about the valuable work that he's done with all of the tornadoes and the flooding that we've had, and that certainly that he's experienced to a great extent in West Carleton, as we have in other areas of the city. But this is just a guy that has made a difference in so many people's life. It's hard to really count the ways that he has. We have a couple of people that are going to have a few words to say. Frank is with us. He's in the boardroom with Steve Willis right now. But first up, Steve Kanalakis would like to say a few words. Steve, are you there?
I'm there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I'm back online. I really appreciate this opportunity because, this is, as you said, Frank has been someone that I've known for a very long time. And what I decided to do, I sent Frank a letter earlier in the week to congratulate him on his retirement. And I thought that the letter expresses best my thoughts about Frank and what he's contributed to the city over his long career. So I want to take a minute, it's very short, but I want to take a minute to just read the letter into the record for Frank and acknowledge Frank for his incredible work. And so the letter goes, before your last day this week, I wanted to reach out and express my thanks and gratitude for all your hard work, dedication, leadership, and for the countless contributions you made to the city over the past 2 decades. You are well respected by so many in this organization, not to mention all the stakeholders that you have fostered relationships with throughout your tenure. To me, that speaks volumes about your character, your leadership, and the pride that you carried for your work. During your time as chief building official, you've had your fair share of heavy lifting. Your hands-on approach made a significant difference as we navigated through the unfortunate string of natural disasters that our city faced between 2017 and 2019. And most recently, your team has provided uninterrupted services to the building industry and the public throughout the COVID-19 pandemic emergency response, which we all know was no small feat. I hope you know how valued your contributions are. Over the years, our city has transformed and directly benefited from your experience, your talent, and your knowledge. You've helped shape our growing and developing city as we know it today. You'll be missed, Frank, but I couldn't be happier for you as you embark on the next chapter in your life. Enjoy retirement with your loved ones. It was an absolute pleasure to work alongside you all these years. I couldn't say any more, Dad, to him. I think he's an amazing person. He's going to be sorely missed. But the one thing I will say, what Frank has done is created a very strong team in his department, and we have some very strong people that are going to step in and carry on the culture and the motto of "can just get it done" that Frank has always had for his whole tenure. So, Frank, all the best from me and all your fellow staff.
And I see Frank, and if you're looking at your gallery, there he is. He's waving and kind of waving beside Steve. Thanks very much, Steve K. That was it was very good. Now we're going to go to Steve Willis. Steve, I see people behind you. They should come into the room as long as they're the right distance.
Thank you, Chair. We are trying to observe social distancing here, but I will say who's in the room with me. So Frank is beside me. I'm really pleased that Frank's wife, Monique, is here to help us celebrate today. And John Buck, our new chief building official, is actually in the hallway behind me. You might see him behind. So we're here to recognize, as well as many parts of our departmental leadership team. I will try to be brief, but I have some really important things to say. And I really appreciate the chair giving me the opportunity to do this.
Steve, can you speak to the mic, closer to the mic? Yeah. Steve, can you speak closer to the mic, please?
Thank you, Chair, Councillor. I hope this is better. So in my entire career, I have met very few people who treat public service the way Frank does. And his view of public service is incredibly genuine. He believes in providing service. He believes in his role as a public servant, and his integrity and commitment to helping the public is absolutely outstanding. And there's no better proof of that. And Councillor Eglai mentioned this during council, but his experience was exactly the same as mine, is after the tornado hit, and when I ultimately got cell service, because it wasn't immediate, the first person I called was Frank, because that's what I have to do in that situation. And Frank was already in the field, checking people's houses, helping people out, talking to people on a one-on-one basis about what they needed to do. And that is probably one of the most awful things you ever have to do when you have to tell someone to leave their house. That's probably the hardest role a chief building official could ever have. And yet Frank did that with grace and dignity and compassion and empathy. And that, to me, is the definition of a public servant. Secondly, you know, in my job, when I talk to the industry, like I do, the thing I always hear about Frank is he is incredibly well respected for the fact that he is fair. And again, that's also one of those things I couldn't ask for any more from a chief building official. You know, Frank and I talked a little bit about his background, and you know, I've only worked with him for 3.5 years, but he said to me, you know, he's always wanted to work on buildings since he was a teenager, and he tried to understand what role that would be. So I'm really happy that Frank gets to go out on a high as having led one of the largest building code groups in all of Canada. And you know, it is different leading a big city building code group compared to a small city. And you know, with the evolution we're in the middle of changing from small buildings to large buildings, very large, complex institutional buildings, that is not an easy thing to do. And he's going out on top for sure. Frank is incredibly well respected among his peers in the building code business across Ontario. And you know, it shows recently how when we kept building code services going during the pandemic, and I'll come back to that, all of the other chief building officials in Ontario were calling him for advice on how to do it. And you know, Frank and I had a moment together last night, and we had a bit of a conversation. And I can tell you that in March, when everything was unknown about this pandemic, and we were trying to, as a department, figure out what we were going to do. And when Frank and I were talking about building code in particular, it weighed very heavily on both of us that, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands of jobs were dependent on the decisions we were making about keeping building code operations going. And Frank found a way to do it, and he led his team through a very difficult, uncertain time. And that is an enormous commitment. And I'm really proud of what he pulled off during that time period. Now, Frank should be proud of what he's lived through in his time period. He's been at the core of city building. But I'm going to tell you two very specific examples of city building that, you know, his work is a little bit behind the scenes. It's not in front of council. But I'll tell you two things that I think are important achievements. So our menu of federal buildings in Ottawa are extremely complicated, and they're in an era of massive renewal. If you see the work happening on a lot of federal buildings, the old War Museum building, the Parliament buildings, and the like, and Frank has built an absolutely outstanding relationship with our federal partners on extremely complicated restoration issues for very, very old buildings. The second city building piece that Frank is told me he said was probably the thing he was proudest of most of in his career of being involved in was the building of the Shaw Center, which, as you can appreciate when you look at it, it is like the building code book was never designed for a building like that. It's an incredibly complicated building, both on the inside and the outside. And Frank had to do a lot of work with alternative methods of approvals under the building code to make that happen. So he's very proud of that. And those are really, really significant things that happen in this city that he's been involved in. You know, regret it's only been 3.5 years, Frank. I would have liked it to have been longer. And this is not the send-off that I wanted to have for you, but this is what the pandemic allowed. So I want to wish him all the best on a well-earned and deserved retirement, and extend my wishes from the entire department and your team and to your family on your retirement. And we have a gift for you, and I'll show it closer to the camera with Charmaine's help. It's a very significant gift. It's relevant to what I just had to say. And I want to thank Councillor George DeRusse for helping me arrange this. So we have as a gift for Frank, a framed photo of the Shaw Center. Because, I'll come back to the microphone, because if that's the most significant thing you were proud of in your career, this is how we want you to remember your time with us. So Frank, congratulations. I'm not allowed to shake his hand.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Chair Harder. We've been together a long time, and I thank you for that time. It's been a great career with the city. First with the city of Nepean, and obviously with Ottawa for the last 20 years. I've had a lot of really good mentors that have helped me along the way. But I'll be honest, I couldn't have done anything that I could have done here without the support of a lot of people. Committee and councillors, senior management, and all my staff who've been incredible people along the way. I look back and I see all the great people that we've had working with us. More importantly, I take pride in the fact that a lot of those people that are working with us right now, I had a hand in hiring and involved in their career developments as well. So yeah, these are really interesting times coming up for the city right now, and I've enjoyed my time, but I'm looking forward to seeing what the city has to bear in the next few years. It's really a transformational opportunity, and I wish everyone the best, but more importantly, thank you. thank you ever so much for a career, and it's an honor and a privilege. So, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Frank. We're gonna miss you.
Yeah.
Don't change your cell number, just in case. Oh, now we'll go on to the business of the day. Item number 1 is zoning changes to regulate residential
Chair?
development. Yes.
Sorry, do you want to do the declarations and confirmation minutes first?
Oh, sure. I got carried away. Hang on. Thanks for reminding me.
Mhm.
I think I threw that page out. Okay, any declarations of interest, anyone? You know, maybe we'll do a roll call too, after the confirmation of minutes. Confirmation of minutes from the July 9th meeting. Are they carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, so let's do, Melody, could you do a roll call for me, please?
Sure. Councillor Dudas,
EC.
Councillor Shirelli, Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Leeper,
Here.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Brockington,
Here.
Councillor Moffat,
Yep, here.
Councillor Hubley,
Here.
Councillor Gower, Vice Chair,
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri, and Chair Harder. You have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll go on to our first item when we have a deferral motion coming from Vice Chair Gower on the zoning changes to regulate residential development in the urban area within the Greenbelt. Vice Chair Gower?
Yes, whereas the report recommends zoning changes that will affect all neighborhoods zoned R1 through R4 in zoning bylaw 2008-250 in the general urban area inside of the Greenbelt boundary. And whereas through discussions with the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association and the Federation of Community Associations, certain changes to the zoning provisions to further the requirements affecting lands both within and or beyond the mature neighborhood overlay are being proposed. And whereas staff in zoning and intensification have recirculated the revised bylaw and report, therefore be it resolved that Planning Committee approved that the item be deferred to the September 24th, 2020 Planning Committee meeting.
Okay, so we don't have any speakers on that because they would be able to speak to deferral only. So on deferral, is this carried?
Carried.
Any dissents? Nope, so that one will come back to us on September 24th. Item number 2 is the R4 zoning review, phase 2. We have another deferral motion on that from Vice Chair Gower. Would you like to introduce that, please?
I will, thank you. Whereas the report details the second phase of the R4 zoning review and recommends changes to enable the development of more infill low-rise apartment buildings and stacked dwellings in existing R4 zoned areas in the inner urban wards. And whereas in recognition of the length of the report and the summer vacation schedules of stakeholders, therefore be it resolved that Planning Committee approved that the item be deferred to the September 10th, 2020 Planning Committee meeting, and be it further resolved that pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act, no further notice be given.
Perfect. Now we do have people who are registered to speak, but I believe Ms. Stephanie, that you have informed them all about this deferral motion.
I have. I've indicated they would only be speaking to deferral if they want to speak.
Okay, so I'll just run through, have if they've all checked in or whomever is here, just so that they can say that. So Charles Tom Bear, Chair of Development, or Carl Tom, I'm not sure, Review Committee of the Manor Park Community Association. Are you on the line?
Good morning. Yes, I am.
And you understand that we are moving deferral until the next meeting of Planning Committee?
I do.
And so you don't need to speak to that.
I'm okay with the deferral, so I will speak on September 10th then.
We'll see you then. Thank you. Next up is Murray Chown. Murray? Do we
Madam
need to
Chair,
speak to-
we support the deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Marjolaine Provo, Overbrook Community Association.
Yes, we're in agreement with the deferral as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nora Benamra, or Benamra, again from Overbrook Community. How do I pronounce your last name so that I can?
It's okay, Benamra.
Oh,
and
good.
we agree. We agree with the deferral. Thank you, Chair.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So everyone on deferral to September 10th, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Okay. The next item, we have a presentation on this, so we're going to hold it. And this is the zoning bylaw amendment for 388 and 400 Albert Street, 156 and 160 Lion Street. And we do have a speaker here, Emily Rukian, who is here on behalf of the applicant, which is Main and Main. Okay, so the next item is the development charge complaint at 130 Britannia Road. And we do have complainant representatives to speak to that, so we're going to hold that item. Okay. The next item that we have is the temporary zoning amendment to permit schools COVID-19 reopening. This is the one that we dealt with at council, so that if the schools needed help in getting new space or adding portables, whatever they needed that might need a zoning change of some kind on a temporary basis, that we would do our best to facilitate that. So does anyone need to speak to this item? Is it carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the zoning bylaw amendment for 195 Huntmar Drive and part of 2499 Palladium Drive. We have the applicant is here represented by Peter Hume and Kevin McCran, if needed. First of all, we'll have Vice Chair Gower read a motion that he has, a technical motion to amend the zoning details. Vice Chair Gower.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whereas the report recommends a change in zoning for the properties at 195 Huntmar Drive and part of 2499 Palladium Drive to permit a mixed-use subdivision, and whereas the applicant has identified the need for a technical motion, which has been reviewed and is supported by planning staff, therefore be it resolved, the Planning Committee recommend to Council that the details of recommended zoning document 2 be amended as follows. Modify clause 1C to read in area C from DR to R3YY XXX5 instead of R3YY 2317. Add an additional clause after current clause 5 for a new exception XXX5 to section 239 urban exceptions, which is to match exception 2317, except where an attached garage access is a public street by means of a driveway that crosses a sidewalk. The attached garage must be set back at least 5.8 meters from the nearest edge of the sidewalk. And clause 6 is renumbered to clause 7, and be it further resolved that pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act, no further notice be given.
Great. So does anyone have any questions for the applicant? This is in Vice Chair Gower's ward. Peter and Kevin, do you need to speak if we are prepared to carry this item?
No, Madam Chair, we're happy with your approval.
Thank you. So on the amendment.
Question, Chair.
Okay, who's that?
It's Councilor Leeper. No worries. Jeff.
Okay, let me see. I forgot to put my participants on. Okay, go ahead.
No worries. Just the technical motion that is being introduced, does that have the effect of creating a greater setback from the sidewalk than was previously required, or less of a setback?
Stream, are you there?
Yes, Madam Chair. So it will be less of a setback. The original was through exception, which is 6 meters. They're asking for 5.8 meter, which is acceptable, because the typical length of a parking spot is 5.2, and we typically like to take 0.5 for snow operation. So they're exceeding that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So on the amendment, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried. And on the zoning bylaw amendment for 195 Huntmar Drive and part of 2499 Palladium Drive, carried as amended?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Peter and Kevin. Thanks for coming out. Next item is zoning bylaw amendment, part of 5725 Fernbank Road and part of 1555 Shea Road. Again, it's in Vice Chair Gower's ward. We have the applicant is here to speak if needed. Does anyone have any questions? Vincent, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
We had about three of us had kind of like an argument yesterday about, not an argument, we just wonder. And all the times I've been calling your dad, Dename, and yeah, another person agreed with me, but then somebody else said I've always said Denom. Once and for all, which one is it?
It is in fact Dename.
Oh, woohoo. Okay. So on this item that you're representing Claridge, does anyone have any questions at all? I think not. So do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry it?
No, I don't need to speak. Thanks.
Perfect. Anyway, so on this item, which is the zoning bylaw amendment for part of 5725 Fernbank Road and part of 1555 Shea Road, carried, everybody?
Carried.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming out, Vincent.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is front-ending report. This is in Councillor Hubley's area, Eagleson Road and Romina Street, Emerald Meadows Drive. And this, anything, I don't think we have any questions. Are we good on this one, Councillor Hubley?
I'm great on it. If you don't mind, I'd like to thank VVG for all her work on this. It's really going to help my community a lot.
Perfect. That's good to hear. So on the front-ending report for Eagleson Road and Romina Street / Emerald Meadows Drive, is it carried?
Carried.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, so number 9 is in Councillor Tierney's area, zoning bylaw amendment. Another big high building, Councillor Tierney, at 1980 Ogilvy Road. That's where Loblaws had their store back in the
long
70s.
time ago.
I worked there. Because we used to call it 1980. That's why I'm just thinking to myself, holy cow, that's where that is. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment. We have only the Miguel Tremblay here from FOTEN representing First Capital. Does anyone have any questions for Shoma, our planner? Councillor Tierney, anything from you?
Just thank you very much. I'd like to thank Shoma. I'd like to thank FOTEN. The Pine Community Association had support this project, but had certain questions, and the reaction time related to bike parking, which is an additional 22 going in, the pathway, so it's not a labyrinth to get in there. Thank you, Miguel and the FOTEN team. And personally, being in office for 12 years, the triangle intersection getting into the Gloucester Mall, finally we can address those issues of walkability around there. So it's all good news, and we continue to grow in the East End. Thank you.
Good job. Miguel, do you need to say anything? Are you happy if we carry it?
I'm happy if you carry it, yes.
Okay, so is this item carried, everyone?
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, number 10, application for demolition of 347 Gilmore Street and alteration of 278 and 280 O'Connor Street. Properties located in the Centertown Heritage Conservation District, obviously in Councillor McKenney's ward, designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And we also, the next one is the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, 278 O'Connor Street, well, the same address. I don't have people to speak to it, delegations. I have, 5 people that will speak to it representing the applicant. If anyone has any questions, So on the application for demolition, does anyone have any questions? Or Councillor McKenney, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind making comments just on the second, not on the
Okay.
not on the heritage application, but on the second.
Okay, so on the heritage application is, to those of you that are here representing the applicant, Kayla Blakely, Greg Mignon, Tony Kazarian, Robert Martin, and David Blakely. I presume that none of you need to speak because here it says if needed. I just have to affirm that. You're good if we're going to carry this item? Just somebody say yes or no.
Hello, Madam Chair. Yes, we appreciate your support.
Okay, was that Kayla?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Kayla. Okay, so on the item of the demolition, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you. And then the next item is the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, 278 O'Connor Street, 280 O'Connor Street, and 347 Gilmore Street. I imagine the same people are available for questions, but I'm going to go to you first, Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. As you know, this went through a heritage application. I fully support that. I think that this is, good addition to the downtown. My only concern, and I did raise it in my comments, and I just want to reiterate it here, that I don't support the additional height. I think that the site is zoned R4. It's a transitional site, and it is meant to act as that transition, and it happens a lot. I know it. If you look at an overall picture, sometimes you can, you look like one block over and you've got a high rise, but at some point you need transition from residential to a high rise in the downtown. So it is generally surrounded by low-rise buildings to the south and the east. I would have liked to have seen it stay, at the permitted 4 stories. I think that it could have worked still, would have been still good, gentle intensification. So I wanted those comments on the record that I won't support it at council.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, I see no other speakers. And the applicant, again, if we're prepared to carry it, Kayla, representing everyone, you don't need to speak?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, so on the item, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for O'Connor and Gilmore Street, is it carried?
Madam Chair, there is a technical amendment.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, just finding it here. Okay. So it's a motion to clarify the report number and content of document 3, the details of recommended zoning. I'll simplify this a bit if I can. Whereas an application for a new 6-story mid-rise apartment dwelling to be integrated with portions of 2 existing heritage buildings will be considered by Planning Committee today. And whereas the report, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 278 O'Connor Street, 280 O'Connor Street, and 347 Gilmore Street proposes an amendment to the permitted building height and performance standards. And whereas the report number and document 3 circulated as part of the public notification differs from the one published on the electronic agenda, the latter being the final version. And whereas out of abundance of clarity, the differences between the 2 documents should be clearly described for a motion. Therefore, be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to Council to confirm that the report number is ACS 2020 PIE PS 0083, not ACS 2019 PIE PS 0083. And be it further resolved that the following changes were made to 2B in document 3. I won't read these because they are up on the screen.
Thank you.
And be it further resolved that pursuant to the Planning Act subsection 3417, no further notice be given.
Awesome. Okay. So everyone, and that's the last one. That's the last technical motion that you have. Another, right, amendment you have?
There's one for item 14, the Gloucester Street.
Okay. All right. So on the amendment, everyone, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Okay, and on the item as amended, carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item number 12, zoning bylaw amendment for 65 Acacia Avenue. And we do have speakers, so we're going to hold this item. And item number 13 is 2070 Scott Street and 328 Winona. And we do have a speaker on that, so we will hold number 13. Number 14 is the zoning bylaw amendment for 339 to 343 Gloucester Street, and we have speakers, delegations on that. So item number 14 is going to be held. Number 15 is 1050 and 1060 Bank Street. We have no registered speakers. We have the applicant is represented by Mr. Holzman, Dominic Santagida, and Maurizio Martiniago. So does anyone have any question? I see, oh, hi, Councilor Menard.
Hello.
Hi. Does anyone have any questions on this one, which is the zoning bylaw amendment at 1050 and 1060 Bank Street?
I'll just make a couple comments if that's okay, Chair.
Let me just see if anybody has anything to say. Anybody have anything to say? No? Okay, go ahead.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I've appreciated working with these folks on this development. The community has been brought in on this. This is the type of example that we need to see more and more often. Mr. Santagida made the initiative to bring in community very early. They've adjusted this development in many cases. There's going through CMHC as well for affordable housing, but also contributing to our Ward 17 affordable housing fund that we've got started, and some real improvements here. So we've been working with seniors in the area for some needed rental. This is going above the zoning, Madam Chair. So right now it's a 1-story. It's business. There's just 3 businesses that are there. This is going up 6 stories, business on the bottom. It's zoned for 4, and so it's certainly an amendment. And in my community, that's not always an easy thing to do, but this is the example of how you do it. You bring people in early, talk to them, make amendments, and everyone takes some water in their wine. So I just appreciate where we've been on this one, and thank the community and the developer and Mr. Santagida for who owns Victoria Trattoria. Thank you for being so helpful in getting some amendments to this proposal.
That's great. Good news. Thank you. Anyone else have anything? So Mr. Holzman representing Mr. Santagida and Maurizio Martiniago. Are you comfortable not speaking if we're prepared to carry this item?
Madam Chair, I simply want to say that it was a pleasure working with the Councillor's office, the stakeholders, staff wrote a terrific report. They got it right, and we're thrilled and hopefully gain your support and council to adopt the bylaw in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So on this item, everyone, it's carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So item number 16 is the treasurer's report on 2019 growth-related revenues. Does anyone want to hold this item?
I have one question.
Okay, is it a short question?
Yes, it is.
Is it only Councillor Brockington that wants to hold this? Because I have Gary Baker. Gary, you're here to speak to this? Are you, Gary? Gary, are you on mute?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so I'm going to say go ahead. Councillor Brockington, with your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stemming from the 2013 TMP, the Airport Parkway Widening Project that Council approved was to be funded by growth-related revenues in the city. And the project's been postponed because the projected growth didn't meet demand. So I'm just trying to figure out from staff the projections that they're working with for this widening project to be funded. And if they don't have an answer today, that's okay. I just want to plant it and get an answer back.
Chair, if I may, I'll actually respond to that rather than Mr. Baker.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
So Councillor, you're raising a question that other councillors have raised on other road segments, and we will need to work with Ms. Chi to get you a more detailed response. So if you don't mind, I will take that offline. We do have would normally be updating the TMP projections to update the DCs in the next round, and we're working on an interim strategy to review that. So that's something that's under discussion between Transportation Services and ourselves right now. But in the meantime, I will get you a more direct answer to the question you have, but I just can't do that today without Ms. Chi available.
That's fine. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on the treasurer's report, is it received?
Received.
Thank you. The next item, I think that we're going to hang on to this till the end of the day because is the situation still the same, Mr. Willis, that there could be an announcement today from the provincial government that might give us more information?
Chair, there's a lot of uncertainty about the timing of this. I know Mr. Schrum and I are here to help answer any questions. I think probably I've discussed this matter with many members of council, and almost all the questions council has, we can't answer until we see draft regulations from the province. So Mr. Schrum and I are more than happy to answer questions, but I think the majority of them will be, we're going to have to wait till we see more details.
Any idea when that might be?
We only have rumors, Chair. We don't have facts.
Would the rumor benefit us putting this on the agenda for September 10th?
Chair, I think the report stands on its own. It's an information report on the status of it. If there is further developments on the release of the regulations, Mr. Schrum and I will make ourselves available to brief committee at the next meeting.
Okay, I think that's probably the way to go. Does anyone else, anyone online want to add anything to that before we agree that we'll have it on the next agenda? I'm looking at waving no. So it's almost like we should table it, but what should we do, Mr. Do we need to do anything, Mr. Mark, to have it on the next agenda? And because we're just asking to receive it today. I suppose we could receive it and ask for an update at the next meeting. Would that be appropriate?
Madam Chair, you have two paths open to you. It is unusual to defer an information report, but that's option number one. And then option number two, and I think it's the option I would recommend, is that if there is information forthcoming, it could be added to the agenda by 2/3 vote at such time as the general manager advises you that there is actually information to bring in front of committee. So my recommendation is you receive the report today, and if the item needs to be added at a subsequent committee meeting, you can do so by 2/3 vote.
Okay. Does that if that doesn't suit anyone, please let me know. But otherwise, that's what we will go forward with. So we'll receive this item and with the understanding that we'll bring more further information as we have it to any report that comes forward. We pretty much do that. We do that anyway. So it's on this item, on item number 17, the briefing on planning and development charges aspects of Bill 197, COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act. Is that received?
Received.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Now I'm still seeing the cash in lieu, but I think that we're not dealing with that one today. Even if somebody wants to lift it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go back to the beginning, and just because I have so many piles of papers here, I just want to confirm the ones that we've held. We've held item number 3, which we're going to have a presentation. So get ready for that, please, Mr. McRae. We've held number 4, which is the development charge complaint on Britannia Road. We've held number 12, 65 Acacia Avenue, their delegations. We've held 2070 Scott Street in Monona. We have a delegation, and we've held number 14. I have a feeling I missed one, but is that all that you have too, Ms. Duffany?
Sorry, Chair, I was involved in an email as you were reading. I have items, I can read back. I have items 3, 4, 12, 13, 14.
That's good then. Okay. All right, so let's go back to item number 3, which is the zoning bylaw amendment, 388 and 400 Albert Street, 156 and 160 Lion Street. This is, we're doing a presentation on this item. Vice Chair Gower and I thought that it's a very good representation of some very good work in our downtown. And so we wanted to show you. We don't have any speakers speaking against it, but it's certainly worthy, especially for the people watching too, to see what's going on with this site. This is a site that also has a long history. Back when I was in my earlier days of chairing the Ottawa Public Library, this was a city block that was going to be a very, very large library, about 350,000 square feet, as I recall. So this is the plan, and it's, are you ready, Mr. McCray?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So it's Andrew McCray, the file lead on this application. Thank you for the opportunity bringing this before committee today for this presentation. So the site is known as 400 Albert, which does include the addresses 388, 400 Albert, 156 and 160 Lion. As you can see, it's almost an entire city block bound by Albert, Lion, Bay, and Slater, with the exception of the northwest corner where there's existing 3-story apartment buildings. So it is in the central area. It's also located 1 block south of the Lion O train station and the new Claridge Moon development, which has a grocery store at the bottom as well, downtown close to Parliament. Next slide. So the proposed development is a really excellent example of a mixed-use development that is incorporating a lot of features that we're looking for in downtown. You can see the heights range from 23 stories to 29 stories and 35 stories. There is a mid-block connection designed into the development, which will be a really strong pedestrian realm environment. I have a slide later connecting Albert Street and Slater Street. On the corner of Albert and Lion, there is going to be a design for an urban park that will be ultimately owned by the city. So we worked very closely with the applicant, securing that space. We've got some design concepts that are being worked through. I'll show you that in a moment. So we've got 1 tower facing Albert Street and then the other 2 towers on Slater and at the corner of Lion. Next slide, please. So the development, I just wanted to include this slide. The development is, when you look at the whole development, it is approximately 930 units with 430 parking spaces down below. As mentioned, there is that mid-block connection between Lion and Albert, which it was originally designed to have the delivery trucks drive through that space, come in one side and out the Albert Street. But the new design puts vast majority of the loading activity on Albert Street, where a truck would come in and out just from Albert Street and not interrupt that pedestrian realm experience. Another thing to note on this slide is the garage entrance is on Bay Street, and this was originally an issue with the community. It may still be an issue with the community or concern, but they've done a really good job at redesigning this entrance so that it's recessed and pulled back from the street, so that vehicles entering and exiting don't have any conflict with the sidewalk and cycle lane. A vehicle can pull up out of the garage, sit there before entering that infrastructure and have clear sight lines before going into Bay Street. So really good design aspect there. And then you see the really great opportunity for ground floor and second floor retail here. And if the applicant speaks, I'll get them to confirm the uses, but there's a really good synergy happening here with the Moon development across the street, delivering a grocery store into this neighborhood, and then this development delivering other great community serving uses through those retail spaces. And then you see the park there again at the corner of Albert and Slater. Next slide, please. The architecture and design on this development is quite remarkable. It was very well received by the planning department and received really strong support from our urban design review panel as well. It's a really unique design that incorporates curvilinear designs, is looking like the building kind of moving through the sky. Really strong materials. You can see at the podium level that there's a range of different heights and setbacks, and the building kind of cascades with a bunch of terraces as it gets higher. So a really unique design. The two images here are the facades you're seeing from the Albert slide, and I'll go to the next slide, please. And then these are the images of the building from the Slater side. The top left corner is the architecture you see from Slater and Lyon, and then the other image on the right is the Slater elevations. So really strong architecture. It's a really unique and different look for Ottawa, and I think it's a great example of the type of quality we're looking in our downtown core as well as in our design priority areas. Next slide, please. This is a rendering image of that mid-block connection. So it's looking from the Slater slide. Things to note is that this space is going to be flanked by the retail uses. So again, some good opportunity and synergy to animate that space, make it a really strong pedestrian realm. There's also opportunities for informal connections through the buildings, whether you're going outside through this pathway or in through the retail space and out to the urban park. So just all around really good connectivity through this site and public realm treatment. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of some of the design concepts for the urban park at the corner of Albert and Lyon. This will go through a separate public process, but the applicant has really started to develop a conversation about what could go into that space, from seating, street trees, different types of lighting, day and nighttime use, to really animate that corner and make it a strong urban park that the city will end up owning. Next slide. And then just a couple images of the type of infrastructure we're looking at to make this a really quality public space and work well with the development. Next slide, I lastly want to touch on the view protection. So when this item was first submitted, the tallest tower was 38 stories, and it was sort of threatening going above our view plane protection policies. We worked really close with the applicant between the City of Ottawa and the National Capital Commission. And now what you have before you is heights that are reduced so that the two buildings, and I should say that this site is uniquely situated. It's in the background area of our height control policies. It's not part of the specific height limits where there's a prescribed number. So you have to meet the intent and purpose of fitting within the skyline, not altering that impact, not having impact on our symbolic features like Parliament Hill. And you can see in the two images where the blue buildings fit and situate themselves within that existing skyline. So it's going to work very well. And like I said, the site's uniquely situated that this type of thing would be really, really difficult to replicate. So there's no concern here about a precedent setting of having those heights. And it works well. And we did good work between the City of Ottawa and NCC. So Madam Chair, at the end of the day, I think it speaks volumes that a development of this nature, not having anyone come out from the public in opposition, is a really strong point. And we look forward to the site plan process on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think you're on holiday, so thank you for coming in on your holiday to showcase this application. It's it really is distinctive, and you know, it reminds me of, I know when we looked at putting the library on, at that location, it was thinking about the renaissance of that part of the downtown. Certainly the downtown over these years, probably 12 years now, at least since that time, has changed a lot. But still, what this will do to that part of the downtown is significant. And I'm sure Councillor McKenney, would you like to comment on how excited you are about trees and parking, and not parking, park, sorry. That would be, but I looked at it and I just thought, and so did Vice Chair Gower, that really it's something that is quite special. Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to have a look at.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I do have Jeff Leeper, Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. And The architecture looks great. I'm quite jealous as Scott Street evolves a little more blandly. I'd love to see this sort of design, not just in the downtown core. But what is staff's commitment to ensuring that we achieve that quality architecture that we're being shown in these renderings? The icon at Dow's Lake was going to be a more distinctive building. It is less so in its final form. How committed are you to making sure that the building looks like the rendering when it's finally constructed?
Madam Chair, the councillor raises an excellent question. It's a good opportunity to mention that I'm quite confident this is the design you're seeing before you with the rezoning is what will transpire in the site plan. Through the site plan application, we do have the ability to strictly tie elevations to plans. Going back to pre-consult, staff actually raised the question about how are you going to deliver this curvilinear design? And I don't know if the applicant wants to speak to it or not, but they actually pointed out some similar developments that this group has done in Toronto, where they've used that type of design and that curvilinear feature. And we've seen those work out very well. And I'm confident that the dialogue we've had going back from pre-consult stage to where we are now, that this is the program intended for this building, and that site plan approval process will secure that through the conditions and approved plans.
Councillor Leeper?
I absolutely would be interested in hearing from the developer on that front, because our ability to regulate architecture is somewhat limited. I know we have some tools through site plan, but it is one of the justifications for the much greater height than previous zonings might have allowed is great design, and we're making a really important effort in that in our new official plan. Great public realm, great design is part of the 5 big moves that we're making, and I would be interested in hearing what the developer's commitment is to making sure that the architecture turns out to be as really attractive as what they're showing.
Okay. Emily, are you available to speak to that question? Emily Rookian?
Good morning, Madam Chair. I am. Hi, I'm Emily Rookian. I am the Director of Development for Main and Main. Thank you, Andrew, for giving such a great overview of the of our development. To jump right into Councillor Leeper's point, I just want to highlight one of the holding provisions that city staff is recommending through our zoning bylaw, and I'll read it specifically. It states that the approved elevations confirming the curvilinear design of the concept buildings and a series of setbacks and stepbacks above the podium. So just to echo Andrew's point, we as a developer are extremely committed to building the towers that you see in front of you. We've done, before we embarked on the zoning bylaw amendment, we spent a lot of time with our architect to ensure we could build exactly what you're seeing. And I do know a lot of developers, can show a pretty picture, but haven't done a lot of the background work. And I can assure everybody, all council, that we are certainly have done the background work and are committed to building the building that you're seeing, and the holding provision further encumbers us to do so. So that should provide, I hope, the clarity that you're looking for, Councillor Weaver.
Okay, and I am encouraged to hear that you're basing this on solid financials. Have you seen anything change in the materials costs and construction costs through the pandemic that change your financial picture with respect to achieving this architecture?
Not anything that would dissuade us from continuing down the path of building these buildings to a high architectural standard.
Okay. Chair, thank you. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks very much, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Moffat?
Thank you. So more importantly than what Councillor Leeper was talking about, what's being done to commemorate the Glue Pot Pub? Like maybe a maybe a lobby bar with a copper top bar top. That'd be great.
I don't know. Emily, did you hear that?
I'm just joking.
I did, and I, yeah.
Well, okay, when we get to site plan and things like that, I'm sure that'll be taken into consideration, but that's great. Thanks. Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, this brings back memories because I was on the board for Alterna Savings, and I remember when we discussed this site over 11 years ago, and hopefully I was hoping it was going to be the library. Just curious, was this site owned by Alterna, or was it? Has there been some transfer since then?
Madam Chair, I can take that question. There's been several ownership over the years. I brought a report here, I can't remember the year, a few years back, and it was on behalf of Alterna. Broccolini had a proposal, and my understanding is at that time they were under a purchase and sale agreement, and then after the zoning was approved, they abandoned that. I don't know if Broccolini ever picked it up or not. Alterna may have owned it at that time, but since then there's been two other owners. We had an application earlier on this with the Manor Park Development Group, who had since sold it to Main and Main with the acquisition of the Lion Street properties. So Main and Main is now the owner, but there's definitely been turnover in ownership over the years.
Okay, thank you. Yes, no, I just remember the discussion of this, and glad that something's happening. But I would like to hear from the local councillor and see if make sure she's happy with it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see her waving, but I did intend to ask her. Councillor McKenney, do you have anything?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, you know what? I have to say this. This is a rare occurrence when I get many more emails asking me to approve something than not to. So this went through a few different iterations. The architecture was always quite impressive. I thank Councillor Leeper for his questions. We've seen it happen before, and residents are rightfully skeptical when they see a rendering and then they see what is the end result. And when they don't add up, especially in very tall and prominent buildings, it does make residents skeptical. But I think that in my conversations with this applicant over, my goodness, I think it's been over a year. I feel that they are committed to building what is a spectacular building. There is to replace essentially a parking lot right now with these three buildings is an exceptionally good use of the site, and it provides for that mixed use that we want. The only asterisk that I keep in the back of my mind is I know there are synergies with Claridge Moon, and Claridge Moon has committed to a grocery store. This is a serious food desert. We're putting more people in. I know that we can't compel grocers, and numbers will bring in grocery stores, new residents and new greater population. But the one asterisk, and it's something that residents in the surrounding neighborhood have asked me, if Claridge Moon doesn't, what does that mean? Is there some ability to locate a grocer here? So I think that given the food desert that we're dealing with, that is a legitimate concern. Continue to watch for that. To date, Claridge Moon is still committed to bringing in a grocer, but no, this is an example of good development. It is intense. It is what's needed. It's what's needed, like you said, Chair. This part of the downtown is evolving. Those folks in 151 Bay, I remember having a meeting with them 3 years ago because I said, you know what, you're going to be under so much pressure in the next few years. We just knew when LRT opened that whole area was going to be under this type of pressure. So thank you to the applicants. Thank you to all residents who took a lot of time to come out to open houses and make the comments that they did. I think that we landed in a very good place.
That's so good to hear you say that. It really is. I mean, that's why we have that's why we're having a presentation today. Often, you know, interest is what drives the presentation, you know, in delegations that sign up on that, but not always. But in this case, it just shows what can happen. And it's so different, I think, than what we've seen. It's big city style. It really is, but in a really good way. You know, I mean, I know you've been to Chicago, okay? It's got that kind of an ambiance, and I love the fact that there's green space. That's important to you, and I mean, I know that you struggle to get it wherever you can. This is going to be good. So thank you, everyone. Emily, did you need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'm satisfied with the motion and just wanted to thank Councillor McKenney's office and planning staff, as well as what Councillor McKenney just mentioned, the very engaged community members who have come out in support and collaborate with us to get us to this point. So excited to see this development forward.
Thank you very much. So everyone, on the zoning bylaw amendment for 388 and 400 Albert Street, 156 and 160 Lyon Street, is it carried?
Carried.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't have a technical thing to do, right? Councillor Gower, Vice Chair Gower? I don't think so. Good, because I saw your eyes and I thought, oh my God, I missed it, but I didn't. All right. So it's carried. Thanks very much. So the next one that is held is the development charge complaint at 130 Britannia Road. We have Richard Ash here to from staff, but we have 3 speakers who are the complainant representatives. Wendy Burnham. Wendy, are you here?
I am.
Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. This issue is purely a legal issue. How to interpret the words of Section 9 of the Development Charges Bylaw. I'm a retired lawyer, and the complainant, Reese Hill, is my son. I practiced tax litigation in the Department of Justice for 25 years and was one of only a handful of lawyers who were permitted to argue before the Supreme Court of Canada, and I had many cases there. Statutory interpretation was a big part of what I did, and this case is 100% statutory interpretation. Our full written argument is document 2 of the report. Our view is that the city made 2 mistakes. First, it did not interpret subsection 9(1) of the bylaw correctly, with the result that both severed lots became eligible for 1 credit, and I'll deal with that issue. Second, it then applied a first come, first served test to deny the credit to the complainant, a test that is unlawful because it is not set out in the bylaws the province requires. And Reese will be dealing with that issue. Turning to the subsection 9(1) issue. Issuing a building permit triggers the requirement to pay a development charge. Development charges on residential development are intended to reflect the added cost to the city of an increase in dwelling units. A credit is available in redevelopment situations under subsection 9(1) of the bylaw to ensure that it is only the net increase on any particular site that is subject to the charge. 9(1) sets out the test to determine whether that site is eligible for a credit. And 9(1) should be on your screen there. Where residential development occurs on a site which involved the demolition of a previously existing building, a credit will be provided against the development charge so that only the net increase in residential use dwelling units is charged. The test is whether the site involved the demolition of a previously existing building. This should be an easy matter. An applicant supplies the city with a site plan. The city needs only to ask whether a building was demolished on that site in the last 5 years. So let's apply that question to the 2 Britannia Road sites. On your screen is the survey that shows the 2 lots. The complainant's lot is 130 on the right, with the house that was demolished outlined by city staff in yellow. And lot 136, a vacant lot, is on the left. Was there a building demolished on site 136? No, there was no building on that site, and as far as we know, never had been, so it doesn't meet the test. Was there a building demolished on site 130? Yes, there was a bungalow on that site that was demolished in 2016. It does meet the test. Had the city asked that question, it would have been clear that the credit belongs to site 130. 1 house was demolished and 1 house to be built. No increase in dwelling units. Precisely the situation the 9-1 credit was designed for. The city's approach failed to focus on the site as 9-1 directs and instead focused on the parent parcel. It is irrelevant that at the time of demolition there was only 1 parcel. What matters is whether the demolition was on the site where the development is occurring. And even if the city were right and 9-1 applied to the parcel, then both lots would be eligible for the credit. But the problem with the city's interpretation is that there's no language in section 9 to decide between the 2. If the absence of language meant that there was no basis in the bylaw to deny the credit to the owner of 136, then there is equally no basis in the bylaw to deny it to the owner of 130, yet the city has done so. And we are left with the anomalous situation that the city granted a credit to site 136 that had an increase of 1 dwelling unit and denied the credit to site 130 that had no increase in dwelling units, exactly backwards and contrary to the intention of the bylaw. My son Reese will continue this with dealing with the first come, first served test. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. So thank you for hearing us out this morning. I'll continue where Wendy left off. So the city denied a credit to 130 Britannia on the basis that the credit is provided to the first building permit issued. That is, it applied a first come, first served test to deny eligibility for the credit. To use such a rule is improper and unlawful. The Provincial Development Charges Act clearly specifies in section 5 and 6 that a municipality must develop rules to determine if a development charge is payable in any particular case and to determine the amount of the charge. It must set out these rules in a bylaw. So where do we find language in the bylaw to support a first come, first served test? We don't. There is no such rule in our bylaws to support a first come, first served test. Eligibility is determined under section 9.1 of the bylaws. When I asked city staff why I was being denied the credit, they told me that it was policy to provide the credit to the first building permit issued. I asked more than once for a copy of this policy, and they were unable to provide it to me and eventually told me that this policy isn't even written down. In any case, calling it policy does not make it a lawful use of power. The city has been aware of our position for over 2 months now, and I have asked Mr. Mark for an explanation as to why they consider it acceptable to deny the credit to 130 on the basis of the first come, first served rule. To date, no explanation has been forthcoming, nor have they even attempted to answer this question in the report before you. The city needs to speak up and provide a justification for for using a rule that is not authorized by the bylaw. It is not only not authorized by the bylaw, but it's also inconsistent with the Development Charges Act. The Act requires that the bylaw provides certainty. The rules as to whether a development charge is payable and the amount payable must apply in any particular case. A resident should be able to go to the bylaw and determine the amount of the development charge payable on his or her prospective site. With the first come, first served rule, there can be no such certainty. With this rule, the value of the property can vary depending on the actions of a third party, who gets to the counter first with their building permit application. In addition, a first come, first served rule is bad from a policy and a practical point of view. The value of a piece of property is influenced directly by the availability of a development credit. For two identical properties, if one were to have a credit and one not, the one with the credit would be worth more. For someone purchasing a property, it's important to know and understand how these credits are applied. That information is required to be set out in the bylaws and not in unwritten, unofficial back office policies at City Hall. How are residents of this city possibly supposed to establish a value if it's so uncertain? I'm a mortgage broker by day, and I have many clients looking to purchase property and build homes on them. For the majority of these clients, budgeting for their new home is a critical step in the process to determine if they are in fact financially capable of making this large financial decision. The uncertainty of a first come, first served unwritten rule would send many of these people over the top and into bankruptcy should their neighbor get their building permit first. How is anyone supposed to make sound financial decisions if the city itself isn't following its own bylaws? Nobody's budget should be affected by $30,000 by the actions of their neighbor. According to the city, under 9.1, the credit belongs to the mother parcel. How would this interpretation apply if there was a severance into 5 or 10 or 100 lots? Is every single lot there eligible for the development credit?
1 minute.
I was hoping that the city's report to this very committee would shed some light on how they justify their position and their use of the first come, first served policy to deny me the credit. The report simply glosses over the issue by saying that it was and is the position of staff that the credit must be provided in respect of the first building permit issued subsequent to the demolition. I would kindly ask that you request the staff for their justification, and if they aren't able to justify their position within the confines of the bylaw, as is required by the Provincial Development Charges Act, that you allow my appeal. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Crystal?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Crystal Cochran. I am Reese Hill's wife and co-owner of 130 Britannia. So Wendy and Reese unpacked the legal arguments for our right to the development credit under Section 9 and how it cannot be denied by a city policy that is not contained in the bylaw. And Reese brought to your attention how the city policy creates uncertainty and tension among neighbors. Now, I'd like to speak to our experience navigating city services. You might wonder, why is that important? Well, as residents, it was that experience that led us to unknowingly acquire a $30,000 development charge, and subsequently what felt like fumbling in the dark to come before you today. I'm hoping that by sharing this experience with you as direct representatives of our community, that this kind of deliberation will prompt new insights and perhaps test assumptions about how the city implements its policies. Oddly enough, policy planning and stakeholder engagement are part of my job as a software manager. So you can imagine then how when Reese and I first looked at purchasing 130 Britannia and were informed by the seller herself of the $30,000 credit, I was not the type to simply take her word for it, and neither was Reese. I'll pause here to let you know that the seller was the owner of both lots at the time, and it was also her firm understanding that the credit belonged solely to the lot we were purchasing. And she, in fact, used that as part of her real estate negotiations with us. So Reese called the city and spoke with a building department official. At first, she told us the credit would belong to the first dwelling that was built on either lot. When Reese asked, how is this possible if the lots had separate owners and the demolished building was only on our site, she said, you're right. That doesn't make sense. Let me consult with my colleagues and I'll get back to you. When she called us back, it was to let us know that she and her colleagues all agreed that the policy was for the credit to follow the land that accompanied the demolished building. With due diligence top of mind, I asked Reese if we could get it in writing, just in case. Reese emailed that same building department official and asked if we could have written confirmation of what was discussed over the phone. She replied to the email that it was of hers and her colleagues' opinion that we were correct in our understanding of the development credit, and this was consistent with the bylaw. Our mistake was thinking that would be sufficient. So fast forward past the purchase of our site to a point where I'm 8 months pregnant with our second child, and I happily announced to Reese that we've saved $15,000 for my upcoming maternity leave. This safety net of savings was to help Reese and I while we built our new home and I wasn't bringing in my regular income. That sense of accomplishment was so short-lived when just a few days later, we discovered that the city expected us to pay a $30,000 charge we had not budgeted for. We were devastated. Not only was our savings for maternity leave gone, but now we would be in debt. I can't tell you the stress that caused me during the last part of my pregnancy. And still now with a 2-month-old baby waiting for me as I speak with you. Every night I lay in bed wondering how this could happen to two people who were doing their absolute best to be prepared on all fronts. A city organization cannot carry out a policy if the direction is not clear. The direction is not clear if it's not thoroughly outlined in writing so everyone understands the rules of the game. These rules are required by the provincial legislation to be set out clearly and in their entirety in the bylaws. Even though the city's position about the development charge was disheartening, to say the least, we remained optimistic that we could resolve the issue without exhausting formal proceedings with the city, such as we're doing right now. However, it became clear to us that the city was not prepared to listen to our legal argument, and so we find ourselves before you, the planning committee, arguing law. Even after we filed our complaint with the clerk, we requested a second set of eyes to review the city's legal position, but we did not receive a response. If you can put yourself in what would have been my shoes for a moment, juggling my work, my 1-year-old, my pregnancy, and a looming $30,000 charge of money that we don't have, maybe then you can understand how I'm feeling frustrated and I'm feeling dismissed. We have pressed hard to get here, to have a chance to come before you with our case. And it was difficult to uncover how and who we should be escalating matters to, and what to even expect from a city council meeting. And I'm sorry to say that I feel the average citizen would be destitute trying to navigate this on their own. Not everyone has a lawyer in the family. We're asking you today to please return the development charge levied against us, not only based on the clear legal grounds that we've presented, but also on the compelling moral grounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Crystal, have you, the email that you talked about, have you submitted that as part of your conversations with the city?
No, we did not submit that.
Okay, so
it was a pretty short email chain.
But if you have it, I think it's important.
Okay.
And if it says what you said that it said, I think that I'd be happy to delay today until Mr. Mark can have a look at it. So do you have that?
We do have that. Sorry, I'm looking to Wendy as our do anything without Wendy.
Yeah.
So it's Reese here. So I have the email, but the problem with the email is that it just reviews what we had a conversation on the phone, and it doesn't actually say what the city's position on it is. It just says that our conversation that we had over the phone is accurate.
Okay, so I still think that you should submit that. There's probably, you know, I'm hearing from some various people on that are texting me on the planning committee. So I'm going to go. We do have a few speakers, so I guess all three of you are in the same room, and you're part of the same bubble. All
yes,
right,
we are part of the same bubble.
Because just hang on, and there may be some questions for you. All right. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry to hear about this experience. And when I heard about it coming to Planning Committee, I called up Mr. Mark to explain it to me because I didn't understand what had happened. Frankly, it's for a layperson, it's very confusing about how this proceeded. It seems like what happened is that it's not typical because there was because of the way the ownership went, and I had to get him to explain it to me a couple of times because it just I couldn't understand how it evolved, and it seems like that either there was a lack of information given to explain it, or that you know, permits didn't, you know, things didn't happen in the timing that you thought they would. But I feel like it's a bit of a misconstrued, and I think that this deserves a little more time, and that we need to look at this again because it's unusual in the sense that it was one parcel with one owner and then divided up with two purchasers. And in typical sense, it's usually one developer who divides up a property, and so this doesn't come up. But because of the way it was purchased, it did come up, and only one got the credit and not the other. So I think we need to look at this, especially if we're going to do more infill. So I would suggest to the committee that they consider looking at this again, because this could come up in future situations as we do more infill. Thank you.
I muted myself. Sorry. Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks, Mike. I have questions. Actually, I'd like to speak to staff about this.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Go ahead now.
Yeah.
All right. So I just want to be clear that just reading the report, this is the original property was 130. It was severed into 130 and 136, but the credit for the development charge went only to 136, no credit whatsoever for 130, and we're only talking about $30,000. So I'd like to know from staff why, at the least, it wouldn't have been $15,000 per lot stuck with the property, not necessarily with the property owner.
Madam Chair, it's Tim Mark. I'll respond to the questions from committee. I agree with Ms. Burnham that the bylaw, this is governed by the bylaw and must be governed by the bylaw. There is no language in the bylaw that speaks to the severance of a property, and I outlined this in the report. And on that basis, there was one parcel in existence at the time the house was demolished. It was after the house was demolished that the parcel was split into two. When the owner of 136 came to the city for a request for a building permit, because the bylaw governs, and because there was no language in the bylaw to deny that person the credit, the credit had to be extended to that person, because that is what results from the language of the bylaw. There was only one credit, and therefore it came to the first one who asked for it, which was the owner of 136. There's no provision in the bylaw that would divide the credit, Madam Chair.
So when the credit was considered and permitted for 136, was any consideration given to 130?
It would not have been, because the language of the bylaw provides for a credit for a dwelling unit on the parcel in question. The parcel in question was both parts 1 and part 2 in the drawing that Ms. Burnham put before you at the time the house was demolished.
Would staff have been aware that there was another lot for development that was going to get 0 credit as a result of this decision?
I can, and my expectation is yes, but I truthfully don't know.
So from your perspective, staff had no authority to be able to split the credit or provide the credit to both properties in any sort of calculation?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
We have that authority, correct?
Committee has the authority to make a decision.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, the credit was $30,000. you can't pull $15,000 back from the credit that was already issued. You can't go
No,
to
ma'am.
136 and say, oh, we actually want you to give us $15,000 now, and we're just going to give that to your neighbor. I'm sure that's going to make for a great relationship between neighbors going forward. So we should come up with some solution here. I don't know how you do it, but reality is both should have been given a $15,000 credit. Since we can't necessarily do a $30,000 credit to one and a $15,000 to other, I would recommend that this committee consider giving the $30,000 credit to 130 Britannia as well.
Madam Chair, it's Wendy here. May I speak?
No, you may not.
Thank
Not
you.
unless, that's just, sorry to sound like so abrupt, but we've got to have, we'll have chaos if we don't have rules, and I try to follow the rules. And I have another speaker, unless one of the speakers asks you questions, but you heard what we've heard from Councillor Kavanaugh and Councillor Moffat so far, and now Councillor Leeper and then Councillor Gower. So are any of you going to have a question for either Wendy,
Yes.
Reed, or Crystal? Okay, so you heard that. Wendy, you're going to get a question from Councillor Leeper. Go ahead, Jeff.
So I've got two questions. The first is for Mr. Mark. You know, I found Wendy's arguments to be very compelling. Normally I side with the city on these. I'm having a really rough time doing that this time. What happens if we do not dismiss the applicant's or the complainant's complaint? Are they then entitled to the credit?
The committee needs to make a decision, Madam Chair. It would seem to me that the converse of not dismissing the complaint is that you would have to allow it in whole or in part.
And what happens if we allow it in whole?
Then the $30,000 and some odd dollars would be returned to the applicant for the building permit.
And the owner who has already received the credit?
They are done, Madam Chair, that we do not have any ability to recover those funds from them.
So it's the total credit then amounts to $60,000 that the city applies. One is the $30,000 to the owner of 136, and one is $30,000 to the owner of 130.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. My second question is there for both, and I'm sorry, Wendy, I keep calling you Wendy, Burnham, Ms. Burnham. My second question is for both Ms. Burnham and Mr. Mark. Is there any jurisprudence on this that is on point? And what is the practice in other jurisdictions, if that's been researched at all, with respect to this kind of a scenario?
I'll let Mr. Mark speak first.
Yes. So I did not go looking specifically for jurisprudence on this, but as committee will appreciate, I do read through development charge cases regularly.
For fun.
And I do not recall this instance ever coming up in any case that I have read. There aren't that many cases with respect to development charge credits, and I don't recall one on this matter.
Okay, Ms. Burnham.
I have not found any case directly on point, but my research suggests that every municipality words their development charges bylaws slightly different. And the real issue in this case between the parties is the interpretation of 9(1). And there's certainly lots of jurisprudence right up to the Supreme Court of Canada on statutory interpretation. And I can assure you that the law is on our side with respect to statutory interpretation.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. I'll move on.
Thank you. What, Vice Chair Gower, do you still want to speak?
Well, Councillor Leeper pursued some of the questions that I was wondering about. I think it may be wise for a committee to direct staff, regardless of what the decision is here on whether or not these charges should be refunded or credited. I think it's pretty clear we need to clarify or update the bylaw so something like this could not happen again. I'm still on the fence as to what the right thing is to do on this
Yeah.
one. I think we should direct staff to at least do a review of this bylaw and update it so that we have clarity on when lots are severed like this.
Okay, Mr. Mark, can you take that direction as stated by Councillor Gower? Or
Of
do you need
course, madam.
something formal?
No, nothing formal is needed, Madam Chair. Staff will be happy to do so.
Perfect. Well, now we're going to go back to Councillor Moffat. Councillor Moffat?
Thanks. I'd just like to move that the report recommendations be altered to state that the planning committee recommend the council accept the development charge complaint in respect of 130 Britannia Road rather than dismissed.
So thank you very much, Councillor Moffat. I know that Ms. Stephanie is typing that up. Does anyone want to speak to the motion that Councillor Moffat is moving? No. All right. So, oh, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Kavanagh?
Yes, I just want to thank Councillor Moffat for moving that. I think this is the right thing to do. Clearly, it was complicated, and I don't think people should have to have a lawyer in the family to figure this out and do all this research on such an instance. We need to make our bylaws a little clearer. And as I've said before, the fact that we're going to be doing more of this with infill, we want it crystal clear on how these things work. And I really appreciate this on behalf of the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Moffat?
Thanks. And I just want to make sure I'm 100% clear on this. This is no disrespect to city staff. I truly believe that staff had no authority to achieve what was being asked here, and that the only authority lays with us, and we must make this decision. So I just want to make sure that this motion of altering the report recommendations has nothing to do with staff. I don't believe they erred in any way.
Good. And we also want to make sure that there's no precedent either that could be considered in the future from, someone coming in and saying, well, a Me Too kind of a thing. It sounds like it's a very unique situation. And Mr. Mark has the direction from you that he's going to go back and make sure that this is all clarified. And will you report back when when you have done that, Mr. Mark?
Madam Chair, yes. Now, the normal opportunity to make the change would be only in 2024. But if a bylaw amendment comes up before then for other reasons, then we may take advantage of that opportunity to revise Section 9 of the bylaw, Madam Chair.
But would it be possible to put some clarification into the bylaw itself? I mean, without revising it, it just would be a clarification, even as a help for staff, because with all the development that I've had over the years, and Barhaven has grown like crazy and everything else. I mean, my greatest wish is that people actually take the time to ask the questions of City Hall. They don't buy the dream from the sales office of the person that tells them where Johnny's going to ride his bike and where Susie's going to, do her hair. That's often what happens, and people don't follow up. I mean, for those of us in the high growth area, I'll tell you, I'm sure that they'll all agree that you hear, well, when I went to the sales office, they told me this. Is there anything aside from the not changing it because of the 2024, unless there is an opportunity? Can any clarification go in the interim?
Madam Chair, in order to affect a change to the approach, there would need, in my opinion, to be an amendment to the bylaw, but staff will look for an opportunity to do such at the first available opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Councillor Moffat, you're finished now? I see your hand is still up. That's why I'm asking.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Vice Chair Gower?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. if we accept, or if we approve Councillor Moffat's motion, the city would be refunding $30,540 to the property owners. I want to make sure I understand the accounting on that. Where does that money come from? Do we need to specify anything within a motion to have certainty as to where that credit gets paid from?
No, Madam Chair, the monies, in order to file a complaint, it's necessary to pay the development charge. So those monies have been received by the city, and they will be refunded from the same development charge accounts into which they were paid. No direction is necessary on the source of funds.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I can wrap my head around this. If staff believe that working within the confines of an existing bylaw, an injustice was being made, would they flag that in their report to the committee that we have to work within the confines of a bylaw, but we believe there is a shortcoming within that bylaw and we are flagging that to you? And I ask that because we're contemplating two things. One is the motion that Councillor Moffat has on the table now, which talks about refunding the funds. But the other is direction that Councillor Gowers just made that says, hey, we need to clean up the bylaw itself. So my question really is if we believe that there's an issue with the bylaw and Mr. Mark wants to confirm that, then I'm much more swayed into voting in favor of Councillor Moffat's motion. But if the bylaw is sound, and that's what Mr. Mark has to work with, then I'm likely to uphold the staff recommendation before us. So I'd just like Mr. Mark to comment.
Madam Chair, it occurs to me that the two items can both be true. That the bylaw can be sound, and in my opinion it is, but that a more specific approach, which has been invited by Councillor Gower, would be in order. And so committee will decide what it wishes to decide. But in my opinion, the bylaw is clear, but in order to provide more specificity with respect to entitlements or credits, can that be done? I believe it can, and is something that staff would be prepared to do, as I said, at the earliest possible opportunity.
And Mr. Mark, you still, based on the conversation we've had this morning, believe that your recommendation should stand?
Madam Chair, I believe the staff recommendation is sound, but as I noted, the legislation puts this decision in front of committee and council.
Very well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And so I see no further speakers. So thank you, everyone. We do have the amendment from the amending motion from Councillor Moffat. The Planning Committee recommend that Council accept the development charge complaint in respect of 130 Britannia Road. I'm going to ask for yeas and nays on that. Councillor Dudas?
Yay.
Councillor, I'm going to think of Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli, Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Vice Chair, I'm sorry, Chair Elshinteri? Chair Hubley? He had to step up out for a meeting. Oh, you're back. I know.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm still on the meeting.
Thank you for making yourself so available with everything else you're doing today. And Vice Chair Gower?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Did I get everybody? Miss Stephanie?
You did.
Okay, it's a miracle because I kind of bounced around there. All right, so that item, the votes are in favor of the Councillor Moffat motion. So on the report as amended, carried,
Carried.
Carried.
and with one dissent being Councillor Brockington. Correct, Councillor Brockington?
Correct.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Ms. Burnham, Mr. Hill, and Ms. Cochran for coming out today. I think that you did a very good job at explaining why it was important we hear from you. So thanks very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone as well. And I want to make it clear that there's still a lot of respect for city staff on this, and that they were working with what they had, but sometimes we don't have the right tools, and sometimes we have to sharpen them a little. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. And I want to thank the residents for coming out and bringing this forth.
Thank you. Well said. And as our legal expert, Mr. Mark, said, you know, all of that you just said is accurate, but there is a reason for it to come to planning committee for that final determination. Okay. All right, so we'll go on to the next held item, which is 65 Acacia Avenue, and it's a zoning bylaw amendment. We do have someone here, a delegation to Derek Crane. Derek, are you here? We've also had correspondence as noted, including from Derek. Derek, are you on the line?
I'm just bringing him in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Is he still on mute?
Nope, that should be good.
Derek, are you there? Okay. Is Richard Colvin on the line or in the bubble?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Is this Richard?
Yes.
We're going to go ahead with, we'll go ahead with Richard before Derek then, because, and Derek will get your mic fixed up. So you have 5 minutes, Richard. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks. So my name's Richard Colvin. I'm the owner of 41 Acacia, which is adjacent to 65 Acacia to the south side. So thank you for hearing my input. So I have some strong objections to the request to rezone 65 Acacia, but relate to the setbacks. And there's kind of two sets of concerns or comments. One relates to its impact on the neighborhood, and secondly, impact on my own property, 41 Acacia. I'd like to note the developer did hold 2 meetings with the community, which are quite well attended. He did make some modifications, but they're relatively minor. And in his comments to the report, our councillor Ralston King suggests that the developer has addressed all of the key areas of concern, but unfortunately that is not really the case. So talk about the impact on the neighborhood. Obviously I live in the neighborhood, so this is sort of related to me as well. So far 67 households have written letters of opposition to this proposal, which is a very high number and reflects deep community concern about this particular project. That includes the Lindonley and Rockcliffe community associations. Why is there so much opposition? I don't know if you can see this, but there's, so it's kind of, wasn't much notice, so I've done a little map. But basically,
okay.
Sorry.
No,
So,
actually, just hold it. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, so we have Beechwood and Putman at the bottom of the hill. This is Lindonley area. And then you have at the top Rideau Terrace, Corona. So basically this is a steep hill coming, this is Acacia here, and the 65 Acacia property. So it's quite an unusual topography. It's a steep hill ascending from this kind of flat plain area. and then it crests at, it's basically like a 2-block stretch, but crests up here. So this is quite it's a leafy green, low-rise neighborhood. Linden Lee on one side of Acacia and Rockcliffe on the other. And these all, the little black dots are all, sorry, this is Acacia here. I've got it backwards from where I'm looking at it. All of these black dots, these are like individual homes. There's some semi-detached and mostly detached, and then you have some apartment buildings at the crest of a hill. But they're 3 stories and they're quite extensive setbacks and they're at the top of the hill. So I think a great deal of a community concern has to do with particular stretch of Acacia. So it's what's being proposed is really like it's a large structure. It's 4 stories, which would in effect be 5 stories when you're looking at it from either the bottom of a hill going up or on the street facing it. It has ground level parking and then 4 stories above it. So if it's rezoned to permit reduced setbacks, it would really be a massive structure compared to everything surrounding it. A very large structure without greenery, all the mature trees would be knocked down. So it would really like stick out like a sort of sore thumb in this old, mature, residential, low-rise green neighborhood. So there's kind of this visual effect that will create, which will really impact the feel, the character, again, of what is a purely residential and an established area. Secondly, I guess because of the hill, things come down here very fast. You're going to have underground parking. There's some safety concerns. Anyway, that's a sort of a big chunk of the concerns have to do with simply the scale of this project if the rezoning is allowed. Secondly, across the street is Rockcliffe, which is a heritage neighborhood. And I won't get into the specifics of that, because I don't have much time. Leaving aside the neighborhood aspects, and in case of my own property, 65 Acacia, sorry, 41 Acacia, it's on a very narrow lot. So it's so narrow and tight that there's actually a bit of encroachment onto 65 Acacia from a chimney built back in the 50s. So with rezoning to provide relief on the side yard setbacks, I'd have a very big building really right up against my property, and it would stick out at the back. With relief again at the back, there would be it would extend beyond at the back and the front, and it would get very close. And I have a window on that side too, so there's a potential safety kind of fire issue. Anyway, that's the gist of it. Not opposed to developing the site. It's a good site. It's a double site, but it's this particular project, the scale, the impact that would have both on the neighborhood and on my own house. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Colvin? Councillor Kavanaugh, I see your hand waving. Do you have a question?
No, sorry, that must have been left over from the last one.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Colvin. Is Derek Crane now available? Derek, are you there?
I am here. Is my speaker working?
Yes, it is. We can hear you fine. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the challenge here. I should introduce myself. Thank you, councillors, briefly. I'm a professional architect, graduate of McGill. I have a master's degree in city planning and a second master's degree in urban design from the University of California, Berkeley. About 1973, I directed new communities policy for the old Ministry of State for Urban Affairs on returning to Ottawa. I practiced as an architect for about 45 years. I am now retired. I did early consulting with the City of Canada and undertook the first comprehensive financial analysis of development charges out in that area, which was both controversial and challenging. I served as a director of the Canadian Institute of Planners locally. Early on, I was a vice president of the Ontario Association of Architects. I chaired the design review committee of the City of Ottawa for many years, was a member over the 1980s. I co-chaired Marion Dewar's task force in the Central City and initiated the design and development of the Somerset Village BIA, and was a past chairman of the Ottawa Board of Trade. let me get into things quickly. And what you're looking at is an image of the crown of Rideau Terrace Escarpment. These slides would just play behind my talking, and if you want to look at them after they're there. Thank you, Melanie. Let me say from the outset that I'm a strong supporter of redevelopment and infill generally in our city. It is a solution to the long-term development of our cities. However, I'm not a supporter of inconsistent and poor urban design. In my professional opinion, if you go to image 2, thank you, 65 Acacia, as I've looked at it over the last few years, is an unacceptable infill project that violates good planning and official plan objectives and should not yet proceed as a proposed development or be granted rezoning changes today. That would only serve to set an unacceptable precedent and do irreparable damage to a mature and emblematic Ottawa neighborhood. There's an opportunity today, though I appreciate listening to you all over the last few weeks, a very difficult one, to assume some leadership role at the planning board, which is the ultimate decision-making body prior to council. Let me briefly explain the problems. There are 3 issues at work here from a planning perspective. One is overdevelopment. The second is a failure to address the escarpment and heritage area impacts of the proposal. And third, there is a broken zoning height bylaw in this area that needs to be addressed. On overdevelopment, essentially the front and rear yard setbacks should not be reduced. The official plan makes it incumbent upon our community to plan and develop neighborhoods with care and forethought as to scale, nature, and character of existing community. Staff discretion in waiving this requirement is a recognition that the site was not correctly evaluated for building setbacks. This would include especially the 1.6 meter front yard reduction being requested and the 0.8 meter rear yard. The prevalent rear yard setbacks in the neighborhood just happen to be 7.5 meters. The failure to understand the zoning history of this site with its conflicting and damaging rear yard setbacks, I won't go into it this time, but I'll show you a slide, between 234 Rideau Terrace and 65 Acacia came about because of a careless neglect in the urban design obligations incumbent on the official plan. Proceeding with this project as proposed will irreversibly damage 2 properties on the Rideau Terrace. The building setback and building heights were up around slide image 20 to 23. Building setbacks must be realigned with streetscape norms. The mandate of the OP was a mandate of the old design committee that I chaired in the past had in the city. And it's an important one, but it can be well discharged by the planning staff if they use urban design as an important part of their work. It seems to only selectively review this, however, and it was recognized the proposed project violated essential urban design practices. Ottawa's Design Committee review history shows that the project with heritage area adjacency cannot be viewed in isolation. Up to slide 24, thank you. The broken zoning bylaw that we face today says that the building height must be reduced to a maximum of 4 stories above the sidewalk. The proposal at 65 Acacia was ignored, and it degrades the existence of the significant Rideau Terrace escarpment.
Sir, I have to stop you there. You're past time, but I think that perhaps Vice Chair Gower might have some questions for you.
I understand the time limit, Madam Chair. I think I had hoped that if my mic was working, that the original speaker, Richard Colvin, would waive some of his time to get through this last note.
Well, he didn't. I'm sorry about that, but
I understand your constraints. Don't agree with them on this one, but thank you.
Well, you are welcome, and Councillor Vice Chair Gower does have a few questions for you.
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Although, I mean, there's a lot packed into that in terms of the heritage area, in terms of some of the ongoing process. I wonder, Madam Chair, if it might be better to have staff just comment and address some of the issues that Mr. Green raised there.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Mr. Diaco, are you there? Maybe your mic's off. Is our planner there?
Hello.
Okay, there you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you.
I was just thanking the presenters for their time. I've certainly received correspondence from them over the course of the review of this application. On the points that we heard from Mr. Crane, with respect to overdevelopment, the application is not seeking to establish the principle of development. Low-rise apartment building is permitted in this current zoning, and yet we're looking at minor modifications to the zoning to permit this form of development, given the characteristics of a lot, which has grade issues and curvature to it, and the project we see as a whole is reasonable in our opinion. With respect to the escarpment impacts in the abutting heritage district, staff have consulted with heritage staff, and it is not required to conform to the Heritage Conservation District Plan of Rockcliffe. On the issue of the broken zoning and height, similar to the point that Mr. Colvin raised, this is a characteristic and an exaggeration of all the homes on that north side of Acacia, where they all present higher than what they are as a 2-story or a 3-story building. I don't disagree that it will be read as a taller building, but the zoning bylaw regulates height. It defines how we calculate that height, and the permitted building is within that permission. Specifically with respect to the design and Mr. Colvin next door, the applicant has made multiple revisions over the course of the application. The pinch point, for lack of a better term, abutting the chimney has been revised on that edge to be fully compliant with the interior side yard for a degree of that edge to provide compliance. And that was in a result to address that concern raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Vice Chair Gower?
Well, maybe just a follow-up for clarity there, because in one of
is this to Mr. Crane?
To Mr. Diaco, to staff.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're clear on this, because it's come up in here, and it's come up in some of the delegation emails on this. So this is not part of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District, but there was a question about how staff is interpreting adjacent lands versus contiguous lands to the heritage area. And can you just clarify how you evaluated that, this application against those guidelines or those rules?
Well, thank you. First and foremost, I consulted with heritage staff and asked them bluntly what if this was a required assessment as part of this application, and the answer received was no. As well, in my report, I respond to the provincial policy statement and how it gives direction on adjacency and when we are to assess those heritage districts. But fundamentally, Councillor, I relied on the expertise of our heritage staff, who we work with closely in assessing applications within and abutting districts, and the answer was clearly no.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Crane. I now go to Paul Robinson, who's representing PH Robinson Consulting. Are you on the line, sir?
Yes, I am.
And did you want to speak for 5 minutes, or?
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
My name is Paul Robinson, planning consultant for the owners of this property. As Mr. Diaco has indicated, we've worked closely with planning staff over the time period. We've had community meetings, we've had meetings with the councillor. what is before you today is an application for just a number of small modifications to the performance standards in the zoning. It's in an R4P zoning right now. The modifications that we're asking for is, the first is for a front yard setback. The requirement is for 2.5 meters. We're asking for 0.9 of a meter, and that applies to approximately half of the frontage along Acacia. The remainder of the frontage is either at or in excess of 2.5 meters. A lot of that is related to the fact that we have a curved front lot line. And we're having a few indentations in the front facade of the building, which require a modification of the front yard setback. As Mr. Diaco indicated, in terms of the interior side yard setback that abuts the property owner to the south, we have made modifications so that the only portion that is really asking for a modification is the portion of the building closest to the street, and that's from 2.5 to 2 meters. The fourth floor would be 2.5 meters all the way through, and the rear portion of that side yard setback is also zoning compliant at 2.5 meters. The north side yard setback is proposed to be 2 meters throughout, and the fourth floor 2.5 meters. The rear yard lot area, we're asking for a small modification from 126 to 116 square meters, which relates to the request for a reduced rear yard setback from 5.39 meters to 4.6 meters. That is in a pinch point. There are other areas of the rear yard that are at about 5 meters back. That also triggers a rear yard amenity area variance from 120 to 102 square meters. And the final request for a variance on performance standards in the R4 zoning is to have a portion of the driveway in the underground parking to be 5.4 meters wide. We have made modifications over the time to the exterior appearance of the building, in particular the upper level of the building. The building is zoning compliant in terms of height. The height limit in this area is 14.5 meters. Our maximum height is just under 13 meters. We're providing now in the revised plans 7 underground parking spaces. This is in an area where technically the requirement is for 0 for anything under 12 units, and that is the number of units we're asking for. So we're providing more parking than is required. Over time, we have removed a rooftop amenity area, which also created privacy comments, and it also made the building appear taller than it is. And we've made adjustments to the exterior building materials and increased the number of parking spaces. My understanding is that the councillor is in support, and I would also like to seek planning committee support on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would note that both Court Curry and Leslie Collins are available. So Leslie and Court, either one of you, you've been listening to the discussion. Before I go to Councillor Leeper, I see his hand waving. Comments, please. Court or Leslie?
Hi, Madam Chair, I'm here.
Hi,
Sorry
Leslie.
about that. Just getting myself off of mute. I don't really have anything further to add beyond what Mr. Diaco answered regarding the adjacency to the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. I think he answered the question well, so no further comments on that unless there are questions.
Okay. So Councillor, just stay on the line in case we end up circling back. Councillor Leeper?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering, Paul, did you consider just going to the Committee of Adjustment for this? I'm looking at the changes from the performance standards that you're seeking. And, you know, these are not out of the ordinary for the C of A to approve.
We also have a concurrent site plan application that is not completed, and we'd like to have some finality on the zoning. And as you're probably aware, very often site plan committee of adjustment applications are tied to the final site plan drawings.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I forgive me if I missed this. These are proposed to be rental, presumably?
That is correct.
I mean, it's a nice addition of rental housing into a great neighborhood. Okay, thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. I think that's it for questions. All right. So on this item, which is the zoning bylaw amendment for 65 Acacia Avenue, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, the next item that's held is Scott and Winona, the zoning bylaw amendment for 2070 Scott Street and 328 Winona Avenue. Our delegation is Lucy Hargraves. Lucy, are you here?
She's just coming on.
Okay.
Hello.
Welcome. Hi, Lucy. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Just wanted to thank you for giving me some time on the agenda today. I'd also like to thank Councillor Leeper and his staff for his time on this file over the last several months. So my name is Lucy Hargreaves. I'm the resident at 330 Winona Avenue. My home is located directly beside the proposed development, and I retained land use planning lawyer Christy Ross to help me with this issue, and she submitted a letter to the committee on my behalf, which I think you should have in your package. Unfortunately,
we
she's
do.
on vacation, so she could not join today. Before outlining my specific concerns, I think I'll just take a few moments to provide some background on my home and my family. I'm a parent of 3 children under the age of 8 who live in the home with me, and I've lived at 330 Winona Avenue since 2009. The house on my property is a 2-story detached home, which is similar to many of the other homes on my street. My children actively use the driveway on my property, which is the driveway which runs between my house and the proposed development, and it's a safe place for them to play, ride their bikes, and spend time. My house also includes a rooftop deck on the 2nd story of the north side of my property, and this is just a private area that my family uses to spend time together. In addition, my son has ADHD and is extremely sensitive to noise and distractions, and he and my other children will be at home during the day this school year as a result of COVID. They'll be learning remotely. So now that I've outlined that background, I'll just shift to providing an overview of my concerns of the development. I totally understand the need for intensification in Westboro and support smart intensification. However, I do feel that the height and mass proposed for this development is excessive for the site and represents oppressive development. The Urban Design Review Panel report that was, I think it came out in February or March, agrees with this view. And it did conclude that, and I'm quoting here, the panel feels that the proposed density and building height are not appropriate for the site, nor the context. Notionally, the panel feels that the highest density should be promoted adjacent to the transit station and tapered down further along Scott Street. In addition to the overall height concerns that I have, I also have a series of neighborhood concerns, which I think were also reflected by my neighbors in the community consultations and some of the comments that they provided on this development. The primary one being that the development will bring an additional 129 cars to the neighborhood and result in adverse effects in the form of increased traffic and turning onto Winona Avenue. I have concerns around safety in that situation for the families that play on, use, and cross Winona Avenue. I also have a series of concerns that relate specifically to my property. including the impact of the proposed development on the safe use of my driveway by my children and loss of privacy due to the proposed pedestrian pathway that's directly adjacent to my property between Winona and Churchill, and a loss of privacy due to the overlook from the new development. I'm also extremely concerned about the impact of this 25-story development and the construction aligned with that on the health and well-being of my son in particular, due to the noise and disruption that will be caused by this project. And I'm concerned about the loss of greenery and trees between my property and the new development. So I'm a very solutions-oriented person. I've spoken to the developer once and have tried to engage a number of times with them in a discussion of my concerns. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to reach an agreement to the state, which is why I'm coming to Planning Committee. I'm asking that Planning Committee approve a smaller development with a lower height and a smaller footprint to be more in alignment with the recommendations of the Urban Design Review Panel. I'm also asking, if that is not possible, I'm alternatively asking the Planning Committee to encourage the developer to enter into a negotiated agreement with me to address the site plan issues and minimize the adverse effects of the development to my property during and after construction. Specifically, I'd like to see the following items addressed. Number one, I'd like to see the fencing changed from an open iron fence to a solid fence that is the maximum height possible to improve the privacy of my property and prevent overlook from the building and the pathway. I would also like landscaping to be maximized between the two properties and see that some or all of the trees that are being removed between the two properties be replaced. I'm also asking for the pathway to be modified or narrowed to increase the space for a green vegetation buffer between my property and the proposed development. And also traffic calming measures to be considered to introduced onto Winona to prevent or minimize turns out of the development on Winona Avenue. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, that's
okay. No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so what you're asking for are site plan issues. We do have the applicant speaking. Does anyone have any questions for Lucy?
I do.
Jeff, Councillor Leeper. And
Thanks.
then we'll go to the applicant.
And thanks, Ms. Hargreaves, for your delegation today. As the chair just alluded to, these are a number of things that we can work through in site plan. But when was your most recent discussion with the developer?
So we had a discussion, I don't have the date in front of me, but I believe that it was in May at some period of time. Okay. So it was after I know that the proposal has gone through a number of iterations. So it was after it was before the latest iteration of the site plan.
Okay. I received Ms. Ross's and had a chat with her over the past couple of days. These are issues that can be worked through. My understanding is that we are not bringing site plan today. That's a process to come. I do have the ability not to concur with site plan and to force that to a vote. And if I don't see some dialogue emerge here between yourself and the developer, I will absolutely use that hammer to bring site plan to a vote. So my strong encouragement to John is to reach out and let's make sure that there's a good, productive discussion before we get to the point of seeking my concurrence for the site plan. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Councillor Leeper. John Thomas, Lisa Spencieri, and Heather Rolliston speaking on behalf of the applicant. Who is the person that's going to speak, or are you available for questions? And also, whomever, take the opportunity to comment on the site plan issues that were raised and your willingness to work with Councillor Leeper and Ms. Hargreaves. Thank you.
I think Heather is going to go through a presentation of our development and the efforts made to deal with transition issues. And I think, Madam Chair, you're aware of how much we've spent in time and money to ensure that our development was responsive to the needs of the community, including buying the neighboring land for $1.2 million, which is 3 times its value, but we've done everything we can. Just quickly respond to Ms. Hargrave's concerns. We did speak with Ms. Hargraves, I think it was in April of this year, and her lawyer. We've held 2 community meetings in July of 2019, December 2019. We've had 2 UDRPs. We've been working with staff for 18 months. We have bent over backwards to accommodate everything we possibly could. I think Andrew McCrae is very well aware of that. And quite frankly, at no time did Ms. Hargraves reach out to us until April of 2020. We had a conversation, we went through the issues. The big issue she had was with the easement that's on her driveway. We actually heard half of her driveway is actually our property, but we were totally happy to build a fence and do all those things to make sure she was respected there. And we thought that was the end of the issue. We didn't hear from her again until last Thursday when our lawyer sent us another letter, essentially saying that if we don't agree to their demands, they're going to speak at committee. And, you know, we're always happy to talk, but this is very last minute, and we've been very clear with the community. I've given my personal phone number, my email, that anytime you have any issues, please come see me. I live in the neighborhood. So we're not that kind of developer. We try to engage our community members. And if you look at, I think Councillor Kavanaugh is aware of our efforts at 929 Richmond Road. The community supports us. They know what we're doing every day to ensure that they're happy. So that's not our style. We are a responsible community developer, and we will continue to be so. And if the fence has to be a different materiality, I'm sure Heather and Lisa can work around that. If we want more trees, we can do that. These are not deal breakers for us, but at the last minute, it's tough to get in front and negotiate the agreement with 3 days to go. So in any event, I think it'd be really important for Heather to present our project and show the efforts that we made to, address the community's concerns.
That's good. Then I would ask that we focus not on the delegation that just spoke, but on your presentation. Heather, I take it you're going to be using your 5 minutes to do that? Heather?
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could quickly just go to slide number 3 to whoever's operating the, yeah. So on this slide, you'll see that per John's comments a moment ago, we have managed to, sorry, this slide is previewing thank you. Sorry, maybe that was just my computer. Sorry. Anyway, we've managed to, in the last 18 months with respect to negotiations with the city, and we've acquired an additional property on Winona, therefore increasing our frontage on Winona to 39 meters, which gives us a large degree of separation to our proposal. If we can go to the next slide, please. So really, many of the kind of key ingredients come out in our ground floor planning. This is a ground floor plan that you're looking at. So really starting at the corner of Churchill and Scott, we've been quite generous with providing a plaza for the community there and adjacent retail uses, really acknowledging that this is a kind of threshold intersection within the community. That retail does wrap around onto Scott Street, and then you'll see on the north side we have the entrance to the project itself, our lobby, and then adjacent to that, some amenity space that we envision as a kind of WeWork space that also contributes and animates the pedestrian realm. And then turning the corner onto Winona, we have 4 grade-related townhouses that really start to speak to the issues of transition, proceeding southward down Winona. We've located the entrance to our parking garage, and the massing of our building continues to step down along Winona. And then Mrs. Hargraves, who was just speaking, noted the pedestrian mid-block connection that has been an important aspect to the proposal with respect to our presentations at the UDRP and committee. So we're proposing a pedestrian through block connection between Winona and Churchill that acts as an additional buffer to the project. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is a panel that we presented at one of our initial public outreach meetings, and this speaks to the kind of architectural expression and uses that we're proposing at grade. We're very interested in potential restaurant uses right at the corner, and perhaps there's opportunity for some bike repair shops. We're right adjacent to the multi-use pathway on the north side of Scott Street. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We're really inspired by a building that has a kind of high degree of detail at the base in the form of a brick podium. The top two images on this page are pictures of projects that Quadrangle, the firm that I work for, has worked on and really led John to choosing our practice. If we can go to the next page, please. These are sketches that have been undertaken during the course of our negotiations with staff, and they illustrate some of the changes that have been made since the original renderings. So you can see in the right-hand image, the very kind of sculpted stepping that we're doing to try to relate to that datum line along Winona of single-family residential. We've also inset the corners of the towers, creating negative corners, and introduced a reveal between the tower and the podium. We can go to the next slide, please. These are precedent images for some of the tower expression that we're currently contemplating. This idea of fins that undulate, that create a kind of dynamic facade and a high degree of visual interest as you go around the building. If we can go to the next slide, please. So these are just some quick floor plans. This is level 4, so showing the kind of setback to one of the podium floor plates, showing the private terracing that we're achieving on the south and on the east side, and the large 19-meter setback. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is the 6th floor where we start to get into the tower floor plates, just noting the outdoor amenity at the southwest corner and the increased setback to over 20 meters to the tower. We can go to the next slide, please. So this is the lower tower plate with 11 rental suites per floor. If we can go to the next slide, please. And then going up the tower, the number of suites decreases to 7. And if we can keep going, these are the building elevations, again, showing the brick podium and the kind of lighter tower expression. The next slide, please. And if we can keep going, please. This is the elevation. Sorry, this slide prior was the elevation along Scott Street, showing the kind of step slab. We have quite a grade difference. And this is just to assure accessibility and also the highest degree of pedestrian animation that we can achieve. The next slide.
And I'm sorry, but Heather, you've gone on.
Oh, have I? Okay, sorry. All right.
Yeah, but how much longer? Because I have Lisa, as long as Lisa doesn't speak, you could have a few minutes from her, but that's it.
Yeah, I don't think Lisa was planning on speaking.
Okay, so I'll give you 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. So this is the Winona Street elevation where you can very clearly see the stepping and the higher degree of detailing that we're adding at those townhouses in the form of picket railings, lighting, and landscaping. Next slide, please. And this is a section taken through the site, again showing the changing grade between Churchill and Winona, and that pedestrian mid-block connection that has been seen very favorably so far by the city, really knitting this project into the neighborhood. The next slide, please. These are project statistics. I'm not going to dwell on these. And I believe the next slide is some community benefits that I think John already touched on. The pedestrian mid-block connection and the plaza. And then this is an outdated rendering before we actually incorporated some of the revisions that the city has requested and that we've been negotiating, but it shows the kind of general intent and expression of the architecture. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hang on, I'm just going to look at my, just a minute. Let's see anybody wanting to ask questions. So that's good. Good presentation. Thank you very much. All right. So on the zoning bylaw amendment for 2070 Scott Street.
Sorry,
and
Jen, comments?
I asked, and you weren't.
I didn't have questions for the applicants, but normally we
Okay.
turn to the motion.
That's fine.
So this is an interesting one, colleagues. I have actually been vacillating on this. I want to congratulate John for taking some fairly extraordinary steps to help this project breathe a lot better on the site. When this was first brought to the community, it was a much more of an imposition in terms of the architecture. It was very what we used to call, I guess, a land scraper. It was just very wide and blunt. And as a result of a very expensive acquisition, he and his architects have been able to bring forward something that is certainly much more attractive. In my comments on this application, I wrote that I am opposing it because I think as a city we can do better. And I wrote in those comments that particularly with respect to affordable housing and with respect to trying to really reduce the amount of parking that is available right next to the Westboro LRT station, I think as a city we can be demanding better. I'm looking forward to seeing what the final architectural expression of this building is. Today we're approving a building envelope. I hope that the building looks as good as it does, and I was excited to see what they're doing in Catherine's ward at the Lion and Bay site. But I would note, as a result of the Section 37, it's going to put $600,000 of that I've asked to be put into our ward affordable housing fund. That fund is starting to come into play to start to achieve some affordable housing in the ward. And I've also asked that around $200,000 be used for traffic calming. So to Ms. Hargreaves' point about the in and out and traffic, I think we're actually going to be able to do some good things about mitigating with a really deep traffic calming envelope associated with this project when it moves ahead. I do think we need to be asking for more on affordable housing, asking for more on design, asking more in terms of making sure that it has as few parking spots as possible right next to Westboro LRT station. I'm not fighting the height. I'm not fighting the density on this one, but I do wish that along Scott Street, which is an amazing neighborhood as you get into Westboro, that we were demanding better of developers. So I'll be opposing this one, but I do recognize that it triggers affordable housing money, it triggers traffic calming money. They are showing us some interesting architecture, and they've made significant strides toward making it a building that breathes on the site, as opposed to the first one that we saw. My big thanks to city staff for pushing the developer, particularly on that front. So I will leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call for yays and nays, please, on 2070 Scott Street and 328 Winona Avenue zoning bylaw amendment. Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley. As I said, he's probably stepped up for about 10 minutes. Chair El Shantiri. And Vice Chair Gower. Did I say you, Scott? Did I say Councillor Moffat? Yeah. Vice Chair Gower.
Yes.
Okay. And myself, yes. So that is carried with one opposition from the ward councillor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
So
you
our
very much.
last, and thank you to the applicant as well for coming out, and for Ms. Hargraves for coming out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next, the last item, as far as I can see, that's up today that has been held is zoning bylaw amendment for 339, 343 Gloucester Street. And Vice Chair Gower has a technical motion to clarify the content of document 2.
I do. Just wait for it to go up on the screen. Okay, whereas an application for a new 21-story high-rise apartment building will be considered by the Planning Committee today, and whereas a report zoning bylaw amendment 339-343 Gloucester Street proposes an amendment to the building performance standards, and whereas a more detailed wording of certain provisions is recommended to ensure clarity in the interpretation of the new performance standards with no material changes to the drawing submitted. Therefore, be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to Council that the following changes be made to document 2. They are on the screen, so I will not read all those. And be it further resolved that pursuant to the Planning Act subsection 3417, no further notice be given.
Good. So on the technical amendment, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
And on the report 339 to 343, oh, no, I can't go to that. Sorry. Good try, Jan. It's 12:03, so I'm not even going to ask you whether we need to take a break for lunch at 12:30 because we have 3 speakers of their delegations, and then we have the applicant is here as well. Sorry about that. Linda Williams, followed by Jeff Rogers and Mandana Gedaxes. So Linda Williams, are you here? Have you hung in with us this long? I see Mandana's there.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Perfect, thank you. Everybody has 5 minutes each to speak.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I live on the 19th floor of 470 Laurier Avenue West. My apartment is on the south side of the building and faces the north side of the proposed 21-story building. In total, 66 households will be directly affected by this new building and many more indirectly. The fact that a very tall building is being built on a very small footprint on an already extremely dense block is a direct result of the city's policy of intensification. Our residents are already living intensification by choice because we have chosen to live downtown. So we do not oppose it in principle, obviously. However, the end result of intensification should be life enhancing. It should not diminish residents' quality of life. If this building goes ahead, intensification will be coming at the cost of our privacy and sunlight. There will be more noise, more traffic, less parking, more garbage collection, and more deliveries on an already very, very intense and dense single block. The requirements of the City of Ottawa official plan for the central area state that new developments must provide adequate visual privacy for proposed residential units while respecting that of existing nearby units. Also, they should maximize the exposure of residential units to direct sunlight. We believe that this proposed new building does not meet these requirements. The distance between the south-facing units of my building and the proposed new building will be approximately 50 feet, measured balcony to balcony. At first glance, that seems like a lot of distance, and it would be if we were talking about single-family homes in the suburbs. But single-family homes have solid walls made of brick or siding. But here we're talking about apartments in the downtown core. The apartments in my building have big glass windows and sliding double glass doors, and the proposed new apartments will be the same. This is the style of virtually all new apartments downtown. What this means is that people in these new apartments will be looking directly into our living spaces. If I am sitting on my couch knitting, reading, or watching TV, the north side residents of this new building will be able to see exactly what I'm doing. The residents of the north side of this new building will also suffer the same fate. I will be able to see into their living areas. But they will have the choice to live under these conditions. Since we are living in an existing building, the only choices we have are to put up with the lack of privacy, lack of sunlight, or to sell our apartments and move. It is not acceptable that we should have to suffer this loss of privacy and light, so that yet another new apartment building can be shoehorned into this very small site on an already extremely dense block. It is time for the city to re-examine the amount of distance it requires between existing residential buildings and new builds downtown. The lack of privacy and light that residents in my building will experience is not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable in the future either. I suspect that most of you are not familiar with the block in Gloucester Street that I'm talking about between Lyon and Bay. Perhaps you've never even walked on it or seen where this new building will go.
1 minute.
Yet the future quality of our homes is in your hands. I would therefore like to extend to all of you and your staffs an invitation to visit my apartment and see exactly where this new building will go. And ask yourself if you would like to live in a flat that looks directly into other apartments and where they look into yours. And finally, myself and my fellow residents are asking you to reject this project. It will have a negative impact on residents and on our neighborhood. It fails to comply with the official plan for the central area by diminishing rather than enhancing quality of life. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you today.
There you go. Thank you very much, Linda. I'll just check to see. Thank you for coming out today. My next speaker is Jeff Rogers. Jeff, are you here?
I am here.
See you. Hello.
Hello.
Well,
thank you. Respected councillors, I thank you for the opportunity to speak, your time, and your attention. I apologize if I look down, I have notes that I'm following. I do only have 5 minutes, so I'll ask you to refer to the lengthier correspondence that I sent in response to the notice. In brief, this is the wrong building in the wrong place at the wrong time. If it must be built, it should be built within the existing rules. Make no mistake, this is a profit-driven construction, which is not inherently wrong. That's how our society works. But it does have a negative impact on the existing community. This is ultimately private gain at public expense. And I think what's before you here is a request to permit or not permit exceptions or amendments to the standing rules. As my good neighbor has just said, the surrounding blocks are already extremely high density. Densification is not a panacea. I realize it's the go-to word, and it is very applicable to many communities throughout North America and the world. But at high levels, it has a negative impact on the community. The city just spent a great deal of money on the O train, and then a great deal more, specifically to provide for the ability to densify less dense areas further out. There's no need to continue to over-densify this neighborhood. I want to try to counter a couple of arguments that we've seen in the past in community meetings and such. Prior exceptions and amendments that have been given to setbacks or height or anything else are not precedent setting. This is a new construction in a new time with new prevailing conditions. It's a decision on the here and now. The fact that exceptions were given to the Bowery does not mean that this building needs to get exceptions. And in fact, exceptions given to the Bowery or the other large constructions in the last 10 years maybe impede the ability to approve the exceptions this time. And that may be the reality of the moment. The very request to try to build this building on the assumptions that these amendments will be granted, it shows a certain audacity on the part of the developer. And I don't think they should be taken for granted, but rather the developer should show why the harm to the existing residents is outweighed by their profit, because that's really what this is about. Also, this decision before you is not a matter of finding a compromise. They did make a bit of a reduction in their demands with regarding to the rear setback. But this isn't a compromise process. This isn't a matter of determining whether these amendments are in the public interest. And I will suggest to you, they are not. They are in the private profit interest of this developer. There really is no sound and fair reason to all parties involved representing a public interest in allowing these amendments. If this building must be built, it should be built within the rules. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Leeper has a question for you.
Certainly.
Thanks, Chair. And I just want to make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page with respect to what this committee is being asked to make a decision on. There are 5 ways, 3 of which relate to the driveway. There are 5 ways in which this couldn't just be built as of right without seeking this committee's permission. They're asking for a front yard setback, and you will face the rear of the building, is my understanding, if you're on Laurier?
Correct.
Okay, so they're allowed to build a 21-story building at the distance that they're requesting. At the front, they're asking to have a setback of 2.6 meters instead of the required 3. So they're being asked to we're being asked to give them a variance of 0.4 meters, which is, you know, a foot and a bit. Does that foot and a bit at the front yard make a difference to what you'll see compared to what they're allowed to build?
It fundamentally affects the enjoyability of the neighborhood. There are already gray and shady streets all the time. Every bit that we reduce the space taken up in the sky from the varying angles makes a difference to what sun would be received. In the case of the front setback, honestly, it's the occupants of the Bowery who, with the evening sun on the north side, which is the only sun they get, where it will make a difference to them. Right. Does the north side make a difference to the view or the sun from my condo? No. But it does negatively affect the general neighborhood.
But we're talking about a foot here, right?
Every little bit matters when you have so many tall buildings starting to become closer and closer together. Anything that makes the neighborhood less imposing, less constricting, helps the neighborhood in its net appeal and enjoyability.
Okay. No, I hear that. I'm just, you know, we are looking at a difference. They're allowed to build a 21-story building, and whether it has 1 foot more or a setback on the front or not, I'm just struggling to understand how that makes any kind of meaningful difference in what this neighborhood looks and feels like. And I do know the neighborhood well. All right, I will leave it there. I've got some questions for the developer and for Mr. Mark. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper, and thank you, Mr. Rogers. I just wanted, Saeed, are you there? Or Doug James?
Madam Chair, yes, I'm here. This is Saeed.
Okay, I just wanted, you know, recently we passed the policy for the tall buildings and that sort of, you know, which was a very big policy and an important one. How does this application fit within that? I know you weren't in your current role at this time. That's why I said, or maybe Mr. James. Yep. So I leave it up to you.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to answer the question. We did look at the high-rise design guidelines in review of this particular application. With respect to the neighboring properties to the east and the west, to the east, there's a 5-story parking garage, which is part of the 23-story condominium that faces Laurier Avenue to the north of this property. So we felt that that site was wide enough, if it were to be redeveloped in the future, to generally meet the separation guidelines, you know, for high-rise development. The property to the west is an 8-story residential building. And there was some discussion about looking at a limiting distance agreement there. However, we we thought again that it was not really necessary in that case, and if that site were to be redeveloped to be a high-rise building, that there was sufficient room to meet the intent of the guidelines. So we did take those into consideration. The distance between the building to the north and the subject property is approximately 20 meters, and given that the site itself has a very modest, well, I shouldn't say modest, it's a 350 square meter base plate, it's going to result in a fairly slender building on the site. So when we look at the guidelines, that's going to cover about 25% of the building to the north, which falls within our view more or less to be consistent with the high-rise design guidelines.
Good, thank you very much. I appreciate that information. So our next speaker is Mandana Gadaxas. I probably crucified your name, Mandana. I saw you on the screen. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
We can't hear her. You're on mute.
Is that okay? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the only thing that I didn't see, it was about the construction staging, given the fact that Gloucester and Nepean are one-way street. So how they're going to plan when they start doing the construction. So that would be one factor that we're kind of worried about, because there's so many buildings on Gloucester that they need access to their garage. So how is that going to affect us getting to the garage areas? And the other concern, as like Linda mentioned, is the privacy, because we're facing the south and we already could see the living room of the other two condos right across from us. So by having this other additional building, we're practically going to be so close to one another that we could see, each other's living room or dining room. So pretty much these are my concern at this point, and I would appreciate it if the city councils and the planning committee could take this into consideration.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank you.
for coming out today. I don't see any questions. All right, thank you. So back to committee. I'm just going to see whether anyone has any comments or questions of staff, or for wrap up or whatever. Okay.
Chair, you
Jen?
have the applicant as well.
Yeah, yes. I'm just, Councillor Leeper, did I hear you? Yeah, okay, I see some now. Okay, so we're going to go with the applicant now, who is Nico Church and Brian Casagrande with Poten. You have 5 minutes all together, it says here. Kevin Reed is here on the architecture. So go ahead, Brian, Nico.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. Brian Casagrande, Foten Consultants. Nico's going to do the majority of the presentation. We're going to keep it really brief to respond to, I think, the comments that we heard, because I think for the most part, Saeed and even to an extent, Councillor Leeper have touched on the salient issues here, but we'll see if we can add a little bit more. And then Kevin Reed is also available as the architect, certainly if we have any questions related to the architecture. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of committee.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So my presentation will be speaking primarily to the existing context of the site and surrounding properties, the proposed development and the requested amendments, and how they fit in, again, within the existing policy. So next slide, please. So the properties on the north side of Gloucester Street in the central area is located just about 300 meters south from the Lion LRT station. And the current use is a 2.5-story residential use building. Looking at the surrounding area, to the north is the condo building fronting onto Laurier, which I believe is a 22-story high-rise. To the east, in the photo on the left, you'll notice the 5-story parking garage that Saeed referred to earlier, and that is part of the condo building lands. To the west is an 8-story mid-rise apartment building, and between the apartment building and the subject property are associated surface and underground parking facilities. To the south of the property are 3 high-rise apartment buildings with very little in the way of separation distance. And this is something that you see in this part of the city, where there's many examples of high-rise buildings that are built very close to each other. Another example is on the next slide. And it's actually, again, the 470 Laurier condo building. So this is looking south from Laurier. Right beside the condo building to the left is another high-rise apartment building. So again, this is, we're looking at a context where there are several existing examples of high-rise buildings that are built close to each other. In terms of the policy and zoning, very quickly, the official plan, the central area secondary plan, as well as the zoning bylaw, all permit a high-rise apartment building. And I'll quickly note the zoning bylaw here does denote a height limit of 64 meters. We are not proposing to go over that height limit. So the proposed development is a 21-story high-rise apartment building with 115 units. We're proposing only 12 underground vehicle parking spaces due to the proximity to LRT. At the same time, we're also proposing more than 1 bicycle parking space per unit, most of which will be located indoors, sheltered for convenient use and storage by the residents. I would also like to note, sorry, previous slide, the rear yard setback of 7.9 meters. The initial ask was for 6 meters. The current zoning permits a 7.5 meter rear yard setback. We initially asked for 6 meters. After consultation with the residents of the building to the north, we decided to shorten the building and move it forward in order to provide and actually exceed the rear yard setback of 7.5 meters. So the requested amendments that we're asking for, next slide, thank you, is that reduced front yard setback in order to meet the separation guidelines between this property and the condo building to the north. And there's actually a 20-meter separation distance between the two, which does meet the high-rise guidelines in the central area. We're also asking for reduced interior side yard setbacks of 1.2 meters, where the existing zoning is for 1.5 meters, and then after the first 21 meters is 6 meters. So we're asking for about a foot on each side, and then further back for a couple meters, a little bit of a wider building. From an external view, this will not create a big difference, but internally will result in great improvements to the functionality and the livability of the building. We understand that these are not very big separation distances between the building and the east and west interior side yard setbacks, but given the existing context of non-sensitive uses to the east and the west, again, the parking structure as well as the surface and underground parking of the building to the west, we do believe that there will be a much lesser impact. And again, we don't see the uses being redeveloped anytime soon. So at this,
Nico, that's your time?
yeah, I was just going to invite any questions. I was done there. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. And so I see Councillor Leeper, are you waving for questions?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
And it's the same question I asked a previous applicant. Why is this in front of our committee rather than the Committee of Adjustment? The changes from the performance standards seem so minor.
I'm going to let Brian answer that.
Councillor, I'd be happy to answer that question. I guess I'm trying to be sensitive on this one. You know, it's something that as a development industry we've been struggling with because I'll be honest, the Committee of Adjustment has been extremely unpredictable for the industry as a whole. And we've sort of reached a point of much more comfort level when city planning staff are able to take us through a process like this, and provide a comprehensive report and presentation. Left to our own devices at the Committee of Adjustment, it's just fraught with much more unpredictability, and to our clients, the burden of spending a little bit more money, quite honestly, and a little bit more time for us to have, I guess, our colleagues at the city to see the policies the way we do, we think is a more valuable and reliable process.
No, and I expected and appreciate that answer, Brian. The Committee of Adjustment dealing with minor variances should be a very predictable body. I wish that our zoning bylaw was absolutely up to date and that it would provide the certainty that everyone is seeking. It's not, but as a backup to that, I would love for folks to know, what the Committee of Adjustment is and is not likely to approve. And I do hope that our senior planners listen to and take into account your reply, because I know that certainly planning committee meetings are a lot of resources being expended by the members who sit on planning committee, and it's not just a little bit more expensive and time consuming for you to come here. I know it's significantly more expensive and time consuming for you to come here. So thank you for that answer.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions of the applicant? No? Okay, thank you very much. So for wrap up, anyone? Councillor McKenny, Councillor McKenny, hang on. Vice Chair Gower is going to go first, okay? Vice Chair Gower?
I'm just going to be very quick. I did a tally of all the applications today, and I think it's worth noting that if this item is approved, we'll have approved zoning bylaw amendments that would allow for over 1,900 apartments in the city of Ottawa. Most of them in the core, but they do stretch from Ogilvie Road in the east all the way up to Stittsville in the west. So kind of a good indicator of I think we're all seeing more apartment applications in our ward, so worth noting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McKenny?
Yeah, just very quickly, I just wanted to note one thing and then make a comment about site plans. So my comments that are in the report were actually, I didn't have an opportunity to update them. The application came back without any notification. So I just want to note that my opposition was to the original what I thought was too close proximity for the rear yard setback. So I did want to note that publicly. And just on the issue of privacy, I understand why residents reacted the way they did. When this first came, 6.5 meters is very close. If you're 10, 15, 20 stories up and somebody's that close to you, privacy is a concern. But with the extension to 20 meters, that is certainly helpful. But just to note that at site plan, we'll be looking for some way of mitigating that concern around privacy. We can do that through architecture by, shifting windows, making sure that they're not perfectly aligned with the existing building. So just a note that something that we can discuss through site plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Don't see anyone else. So on the zoning bylaw amendment for 339, 343 Gloucester Street, we already voted on the technical amendment. So on the item as amended.
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you very much. Okay. Miss Duffany, I think I've lost all the rest of my sheets, but I think we're at the end, correct?
We are.
Okay. So are there any inquiries? Any notices of motion? Any new business? Well then, folks, we are going to get together again on September the 10th. And thank you all for your attention today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye. Thank you.